Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobooks. Marvel Comics, starting with the ability to replicate superhuman talents. Chapter 61 Gino's Doubts. Luther Factory. The first floor below ground level. Bizarro, who looked like a walking zombie, followed Lex with a grin on his face, repeating the word father in his mouth. This big silly man seemed to have never been troubled, shouting with a smile on his face, not noticing Lex's increasingly ugly cheeks at all. After a period of teaching, Bizarro has learned some basic vocabulary. Shut up, Bizarro, go to the corner and stand for a minute. Lex glared at Bizarro fiercely. Oh. Bizarro scratched his head. He didn't know how he made his father angry. He moved his legs and walked to the corner to stand, muttering and counting, 1.2.3. So, why did he call you father? Gino asked while lying on the sofa. Lex sighed, because those idiots told B0 that whoever created him is his father. Gino grinned, congratulations, you have such a big son at such a young age. Does Victoria know? Lex glared at Gino fiercely, shut up. Gino. The two brothers bickered every day. At this time, a security guard approached Gino. The man bowed down respectfully and said, Mr. Gino, the security guard at the door sent word that your classmate Chloe is waiting outside the factory. Chloe. Gino stood up and rubbed his cheek, a little curious, what is the girl doing here? Are you worried that you haven't come to class for a few days? Sighing in his heart, Gino said quietly, tell the guard to let her in. Chloe walked into the huge Luther factory. It's unclear whether it was intentional or accidental. The buildings of the Luther factory look like the shape of a nuclear power plant, with some towering chimneys spitting black smoke into the sky. The girl stared blankly at the chimney above her head, feeling lost in thought for a moment. Dad works as a workshop director in this factory. Snapped. A gentle touch on the shoulder. Chloe tensed her shoulders in fear. She turned around and met a pair of pure blue eyes. Kino. Facing those blue eyes, Chloe stuttered and backed away. I don't know why, after not seeing him for a few days, my eyes that I was used to seeing in the past looked more pure and blue. What's wrong? Gino smiled, waved his right hand in front of Chloe's eyes, and joked, what's in my eyes? No, it's just that your eyes look beautiful. Chloe turned her head away to hide her guilt. The setting sun seemed to put a layer of gold powder on the girl's beautiful short golden hair. Gino said casually, maybe it's a little dark today. This is of course not the reason. His eyes are blue because he has been practicing freezing beams during this period, so they look a bit blue. Yes, that's right. Chloe nuzzled the book in her arms with her chin, looked at Gino and said, the final exam is next week, I think you need to review. I have marked the key points for the exam in the textbook. Gino listened patiently to the girl's words, nodding in agreement from time to time. Dingling bell. A series of phone rings interrupted the two of them. After answering the call, Pete's anxious voice came from the phone, Kino. Clark has fainted. Chloe on the side pricked up her ears and listened. Listening to Peter's words, Gino was a little surprised. Clark fainted. The two looked at each other. Okay, I'll be there soon. Kino hung up the phone and looked at Chloe. Chloe, come to the hospital with me. Clark passed out. Gino came to the small town hospital again, feeling quite like revisiting his old place. Smelling the pungent smell of disinfectant in the corridor, he felt a little dazed. He remembered that 13 years ago, he and Lex had a new life in this hospital. Gino opened the door and walked into the ward with Chloe. On the white hospital bed, Clark lay with a calm face, his eyes closed tightly, breathing evenly, and he seemed to be fine. What happened? Gino looked at Peter, who pursed his thick lips and told the story. Infected factory employees. Gino frowned and said, I don't know about this. When Earl was expelled 10 years ago, he followed his mother to visit some mysterious magicians. However, it is indeed something Lionel can do. The young man frowned, but he thought of another thing in his heart. Through Pete's narration of Earl's reaction, it is possible that the other party was also affected by kryptonite and stated that everything was caused by Lionel. Perhaps, it can also be proved from the side that my father began secretly researching kryptonite as early as 10 years ago. But, why Lionel never told him these things? What is the other person hiding? With a layer of gloom in his heart, Gino's expression remained unchanged. He smiled and asked, where is Earl now? There are some things that he plans to ask in person. How did Earl become like this? Was it the influence of kryptonite? What did he see in the chemical plant? These questions are all waiting for Kino to find answers. Peter scratched his head and pointed to the ward next door. He was handcuffed to the hospital bed. Da-da-da. The clock on the wall rotates with rhythm. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the pungent smell of steel. In the dim ward, Earl slowly opened his eyes. A person's first reaction in a strange environment is to observe. He subconsciously wanted to sit up on the bed. Wow! The cold sound of iron chains sounded in his ears. Earl turned his head and found that his arms were handcuffed to the head of the bed. Who? Earl panted nervously and clenched his fists subconsciously. Was he caught? Dong dong dong! There was a knock on the door. Before Earl could respond, the door opened and a tall young man with blonde hair and blue eyes stood at the door looking at him expressionlessly. The boy was wearing a casual white short-sleeved upper body, black shorts, and sneakers. He was whistling and slowly walked towards Earl. Who are you? Facing the stranger who broke into the room, Earl swallowed nervously and stared at the young man's face. Confusing thoughts grew in Earl's mind. Who is this person and what is he going to do when he breaks in? Could it be a killer sent by Lionel? Earl also worked in the Luther group, and had heard colleagues mention the disappearance of living people technique of the ZI family. The girl in the iron bucket under the concrete underground of Wall Street has the most say. Earl Skeena, right? Kino ignored the man's question and just stared at the black man on the hospital bed. He stood in front of the man and said with an indifferent expression, I want to ask you a few questions. You used to work in a small-town chemical plant. What made you what you are now? Listening to Gino's inquiry, Earl did not answer. Instead, he stared at Gino with a wary expression and asked, Who are you? Oh, I forgot. Gino sighed, reached out and patted his head, as if he was very annoyed at his forgetfulness. He stared into the black man's eyes, put his hand on his chest, and said word by word, Allow me to introduce myself, my name is Gino, Gino Luther. Listening to Gino's words, the black man's eyes suddenly widened. Thank you to the 300-point reward from the big guys who are a bit stuck. There are quite a few big guys who gave rewards today. I will thank you all chapter by chapter tomorrow. I love you all. Chapter 62 Remarks on the launch. Ah, sighing tone, I didn't expect it to be on the shelves so quickly, but first of all, I would like to thank my editor Ching Huja for his support of this book as usual. Then, I wish everyone a fortune, good luck, good health, and family harmony in 2024. Secondly, let's talk about this book. Xiao Mo actually doesn't care too much about the performance of this book. What I prefer is that what I write can satisfy readers and I can write what I want to write at my own pace. Lex Luthor, who loves his brothers but is cold-faced but warm-hearted, Clark, who is youthful and passionate, Gino, who devotes all his power to himself and cares about his friends. Xiao Mo prefers to spend some chapters describing the love and hatred between these characters, and use this as a basis to continuously promote the development of the plot. Next, we will talk about the development of this book and answer more questions. 1. Will the protagonist follow the plot of Smallville all the time? Answer: no, it will be based on Smallville. The author will selectively skip some uninteresting plots in the prequel, and then intersperse the wonderful stories of other superheroes and protagonists in the DC universe. I often wonder, if there really is such an existence as the protagonist in the DC universe, what attitude would Batman, who has suspicion as his instinct, have towards him? I thought it was interesting how helpless other evil villains would be when they meet the protagonist. Later, when the protagonist copies the double Kryptonian panel, he will gain the ability to jump out of the DC Universe timeline. However, this line may take many chapters, but everyone can expect the protagonist to jump out of the DC Universe and go to other universes to strengthen his strength and stir up troubles. Story 2. About the heroine of this book. This, how should I put it, Xiao Mo plans to have 3 female protagonists, probably. The first is to manage your own power for the protagonist. The second one is powerful and beautiful, able to fight alongside the protagonist. The third one has a strong personal charm and drives the Shura field among the heroines. Perhaps. After all, a heroine with beauty but no strength will only be a vase, and her low sense of presence will also annoy readers. As for the other women, it is tentatively considered a female partner relationship. Therefore, the heroine must at least meet the following points. 1. Intelligence can help the protagonist. 2. Look beautiful. 3. Loyalty. If any girl readers who meet the above 3 points can leave a message, I will consider them as the heroine. Okay, enough gossip, let's talk about the update issue. Let's set up a reward. From the release time of the first chapter to the same time the next day, one chapter will be added for every 500 new subscriptions. That's it, 4 chapters will be updated today. And the 2 big guys will update 2 more chapters, over. Chapter 63 Reporting Results. Report the results as follows. From 11 o'clock yesterday to 11 o'clock today, there were a total of 2,567 subscriptions, so there will be about 5 additional chapters. Let's start with the guaranteed 4 chapters today, and slowly make up for it, and, it seems that the network card of my laptop is broken. I will buy a network card this afternoon and check it out. Then I will sort out the story information of Gotham. The plot of Superman Season 1 is almost at the end. Write a few more concluding plots and switch to Gotham to cause trouble. Chapter 64 Dispute and Escape. Da-da-da. The clock is still turning. But Earl's heart was filled with huge waves in the hospital bed. Panic and helplessness swept through every cell and limb of his body, seeping into his internal organs, causing the black man to keep his eyes wide open and his thick lips parted, but he could not make a single sound. The words Luthor were repeating in his head. These 2 words have taken up too much part in his life, and his tragic situation today is inseparable from the surname Luthor. Earl also imagined that if he saw someone from the Luthor family, he would punch them in the face with his fist. But Gino stood there, staring at Earl quietly with his blue eyes. He didn't know what was going on. He was watched by Gino, and there was only endless fear in his heart. The human experience engraved in the DNA was urging Earl to run away and scream, as if the person standing at the head of the bed was not a human, but a ferocious beast. White tiger. This is ridiculous. Earl swallowed, suppressing the fear in his heart while clenching his fists. Are you from the Luthor family? I'm asking you a question. Gino's expression was impatient, and his eyes gradually glowed with a dark blue light. The air around him seemed to have dropped a little, and Earl looked at the arms covered with goosebumps in horror. Answer my question, what was Lionel doing at the chemical plant 10 years ago? Gino has always disliked his father, an ambitious and evil man. He didn't even attend his grandfather's funeral. He even suspected that if Lionel was given enough benefits, he would even be willing to sell his soul. Earl suppressed the fear and trembled and opened his mouth. No, you are from the Luthor family, and Luthor is all liars. Okay, this is your choice. Kino didn't intend to waste time with the black man. He wanted to freeze him and take him back to the underground base for interrogation. Kino. The door was pushed open roughly, interrupting Gino's thoughts. The boy turned around and saw Clark rushing in with an anxious look on his face. Clark glanced at the hospital bed, looking at the expressionless Gino and the horrified Earl. He breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that his friend had not killed him yet. Kino, listen to me, there is a misunderstanding here. Clark walked to Kino, looked into the young man's blue eyes, and was slightly stunned. Clark was confused. After not seeing each other for a few days, Gino's eyes seemed to be brighter. Clark? Gino glanced at the boy and said, I plan to ask him what he saw in the Luthor factory. I can help him if necessary. This wasn't a lie. For Gino, finding out what Lionel did at the factory 10 years ago was far more important than killing Earl. You're right. A smile appeared on Clark's face. And Gino's rare softness made him happy. He turned to look at Earl and said, Earl, Gino is my friend, he is a good man. Clark said sincerely, you can trust him. If he said so, Earl should be able to believe him. However, contrary to Clark's expectation, Earl frowned with resentment on his face. No, the Luthor family is all bad people, Clark, you have been deceived by him. Earl was very emotional, and his hands were shaking because of his nervousness. He felt betrayed. Crash. The scene that Clark was familiar with happened again. The black man's body twitched violently, and the extremely fast frequency easily shattered the handcuffs. He wants to run. Gino did not hesitate, his eyes shot out pure blue light beams. Etc. Clark's expression changed drastically, and he stepped in front of Earl. Clark raised his arms. Snapped. The turquoise light hit Clark's steel arm. Buzz. The blue light slowly covered Clark's entire arm. Clark frowned slightly, looking at his arm with confusion in his eyes. It hurts. The plaid shirt jacket was quickly covered with a thick layer of frost, and the biting pain made Clark look in agony. Buzz. Freezing rays kept hitting Clark's arm, and the original frost condensed into crystal clear ice at an extremely fast speed, covering Clark's entire arm. Earl, who was rescued by Clark, also stopped trembling. The black man did not hesitate. His green eyes swept around and landed on the window behind him. Wow! The black man held his head, smashed the glass, and jumped straight from the two-story building. Kino. When Chloe and Peter arrived, they saw blue beams of light constantly bombarding Clark. Buzz. The powerful and heavy sky blue beam pushed Clark, constantly retreating and pressing him into the corner. Clark lowered his head and could only raise his arms to block the beam with difficulty. He couldn't retreat, there were his father's friends behind him. Soon, Clark's lower body, shrouded in the beam, was also covered with a thick layer of polar ice. Kino, stop it! What are you doing? Chloe rushed forward and grabbed Gino's arm, trying to stop Gino. Call. Gino slowly let out a breath of cold air, and Chloe's call brought him back to reality. The boy extinguished the freezing light in his eyes. At this moment, the ward was filled with cold mist from ice floating throughout the room. In the corner, half of Clark's body was stuck in the icicles, and his beautiful thick eyebrows were wet with frost. The terrifying cold temperature made Clark unable to control himself and shivered. Clark struggled to lift his frost-stained eyelids, stretched his legs, and tried to escape the grip of the frost, but found that he could not move at all. Helpless, Clark could only look at Kino with his arms raised, and said sincerely, "Kino, there must be a misunderstanding in this." "Clark?" Gino gritted his teeth, feeling angry about Clark's choice. "That guy escaped. And he's a murderer, so you just let him go. Have you forgotten about Gray?" Gino looked deeply at Clark. He was very disappointed with Clark's choice. After saying these words, the young man turned and left. He was going to find out where Earl had gone. After Kino left, the tense atmosphere in the room melted away. In the corner, Peter, who was afraid to breathe, breathed in the cold air greedily, looked around with his arms folded, and exclaimed, "This is incredible. Kino can shoot freezing rays from his eyes." Looking at Clark, who was frozen in the ice, Peter smiled evilly and said, "Clark, can you also shoot light from your eyes?" Listening to Peter's words, Clark fell into silence. The big boy tried to mobilize his eyes to feel the energy, but there was no response. Clark smiled bitterly and shook his head, "No, I can't do it." The boy glanced at the ice chips on the ground, his heart filled with solemnity. Unknowingly, Gino became a lot stronger. Does this have anything to do with the fact that the other party disappeared in the past few days? What does it have to do with that chemical plant? Suppressing the doubts in his heart, Clark smiled awkwardly again. "Now, quickly find a shovel to rescue me. It's too cold in here." Chapter 65 The Soft-Hearted God. At night. Kent Farm. Inside the cabin. Clark was wrapped in a blanket, his hair was wet after just taking a shower, and he used paper to wipe away the clear snot flowing out of his nose from time to time. "I really can't imagine it." Jonathan and Martha stood in front of Clark, staring at Clark with cold expressions. Martha crossed her arms, her eyes full of worry. "Clark, what do you want me to say about you? We just went out for a day, and you can be related to the murder case." Martha and Jonathan went to the metropolis for vacation this morning, but before they had time to spend their wonderful honeymoon, they received a call from Pete and learned that Clark had fainted. This put the couple's honeymoon plans in jeopardy. He ran back to the town in a hurry. Jonathan sighed, rubbed the beard on his chin, handed Clark a tissue, and joked, "I don't think my child will ever get sick." Clark sniffed in embarrassment, and the scene in the hospital flashed through his mind. After Gino left, Chloe and Peter found tools but could not break the ice. Clark had no choice but to wave his fists and break the ice in 30 seconds to escape. But don't underestimate these 30 seconds. For Superman, 30 seconds is enough for him to swing his fist thousands of times. Then the police on standby in the hospital received the news that Earl had escaped, and took the three Clarks to the police station to take notes. It wasn't until Jonathan and Martha arrived at the police station that Clark was spared from spending the night in the detention center. Gino's ability that exploded in the hospital flashed across his eyes, and Clark had a headache again. Gino's strength had increased so quickly. If the other party insisted on killing Earl, he couldn't think of how to stop him. "Okay, Clark, have a good rest tonight." Martha rubbed Clark's hair, stood up and walked to the kitchen. "I'll make you some ginger water to keep you away from the cold." Jonathan also patted Clark on the shoulder and walked to the second floor to change clothes. After the couple left, Clark rolled his big eyes. The next moment, like a bolt of lightning, the boy opened the door and ran towards the warehouse. Clark ran towards the second floor of the warehouse. In the originally abandoned warehouse, a black man was lying on a wooden board. Yes, after escaping the hospital, Earl, fearful of being caught, retreated to the second floor of the barn. Earl was not shocked by the sudden appearance of Clark in front of him. Instead, he opened his eyes wide and begged, "Clark, please help me." The black man said pitifully. "You have also seen that the children of the Luther family are abnormal. Lionel must be brewing an evil plan." Clark listened silently, feeling slightly shaken. Just like Earl said, Gino's strength is indeed weird. Earl continued to tell his tragic experience. "Some time ago, I was sent to clean the third floor of Luther chemical plant. Those people were using some green stones in the town to conduct secret experiments. That stone can be made into a fertilizer that encourages plant growth. I accidentally fell into the crops and several rocks pierced my skin." As he spoke, Earl stretched out his trembling hand and wiped the fine sweat from his forehead. The pitiful appearance made Clark feel weak. He knew how Earl felt. Whenever he was close to kryptonite, his body would become weak. Earl was keenly aware of the pity in Clark's eyes. The black man struck while the iron was hot. He weakly grabbed Clark's arm and said, "Clark, do you know? Before the accident, I had a wonderful family, a beautiful wife, and lovely children. But the accident destroyed everything I had. My wife divorced me, and the child was awarded to my wife by the judge." Earl shook Clark's arm, and big tears fell down his cheeks. He looked up at Clark pitifully. "I just want to return to normal now, and then take care of my family." "Earl." Clark pursed his lips. His eyes were tangled at first, but looking at Earl who was tortured by kryptonite, his hesitant eyes gradually became firm. "How can I help you?" After hearing Clark's words, the black man was overjoyed, wiped the tears from his face and said urgently, "On the third floor of Luther Chemical Factory, there is the secret to returning me to normal." Luther Chemical Plant. Clark frowned in thought. He remembered that the school seemed to be organizing a visit to the Luther group tomorrow. "I know, Earl." Clark patted the black man on the shoulder and looked into the black man's eyes. "Leave it to me, I will help you." At the same time Clark made his promise to Earl. Luther Castle. The originally peaceful pasture was blown by a gust of wind, causing the grass blades to sway. Like a gust of wind and like thunder, Gino stood in the hall as if he appeared out of thin air. "Master." The blonde maid brought the milk, and Gino took a sip of the milk and pressed down his dry lips, his eyes sparkling. "I've searched almost the entire town, but there's no trace of the black man. Where did he go?" Gino leaned on the sofa and tapped the armrest of the sofa with one hand. "No, there was one place he hadn't been yet. The Clark family's Kent farm." Because of the conflict with Clark in the evening, Gino didn't want to break into the Kent farm, which would only make the relationship between the two more awkward. But Gino changed his position, holding his chin and muttered to himself, "Clark shouldn't be stupid enough to believe what a murderer says, right?" As the night grew darker, Gino simply stopped thinking about it and got up and returned to his house. Turning on the computer, a message quickly popped up. The news came from Tina, the spy sent by Gino to monitor Talia. "Tina, everything in the Assassin's League is business as usual, but I heard that a man named Booth passed Lei Xiaogu's trial and successfully graduated, and he refused Lei Xiaogu's solicitation and gave up joining the Assassin's League." Browsing the information from Tina, Gino's eyes stayed on Booth's name for a moment. He passed the trial of the Assassin's League and refused Lei Xiaogu's recruitment. Possibly, this person might be the pseudonym of the Bruce Wayne who wanders around the world? As his fingers tapped on the keyboard, Kino simply replied, "I understand." Ding dong, the message was successfully sent. At the same time, he was far away in a dark room on Alcatraz Island. Tina stood helplessly behind the computer chair, watching the brown-haired woman typing on the keyboard with a playful and evil smile on her face. Thalia's collagenous fox face was full of mockery. Through the reflection of the computer screen, the woman glanced at Tina who looked like a frightened cat, lightly opened her red lips and said, "Don't be nervous, Tina, I just told the truth for you, this man won't find out." Tina nodded, her eyes full of bitterness. As early as after meeting Thalia, she was told the purpose of her visit by the woman using Verita serum. But for some reason, Thalia did not choose to imprison herself, but instead let herself follow her. Sighing in her heart, Tina's eyes were full of tiredness. When will this exciting double agent life end? Thanks to reader 14551471177274122224 for the 100-point reward Epsilon, /U003E/U003C. Chapter 66 Annoyed Clark, additional update for the boss with tale number 12224. The early morning sun hits the yellow school bus. Honestly, I hate today's trip to the Luther chemical plant. Chloe frowned, her cheeks reflected in the glass. The girl looked unhappy. Peter, who was in the next seat, said with a bad smile, "It's because Chloe's father also works in a chemical factory, and her father is also a show-off maniac." "Shut up, Pete." The two were bickering, but Peter was a little surprised that Clark didn't say a word. He just lowered his head and looked at the iron plate of the school bus, as if he was watching something. Peter stretched out his hand and waved it in front of Clark's eyes. "Clark, what are you thinking about?" "Ah." Clark came to his senses in a panic and licked his lips. "I didn't think about anything." And from an angle that no one can see. Under the chassis of the school bus, Earl, a black man, was hiding in the luggage storage mezzanine with a difficult expression. "Everyone, welcome to Luther Chemical Plant." The middle-aged man in a suit and tie puffed out his chest with pride, holding a document bag in his hand and looking at the dozens of students who visited today. Clark, Chloe, Pete, and Lana and her ex-boyfriend Whitney. The middle-aged white man smiled and said, "I am Gabe Sullivan. I am the manager of the factory and a proud father, right?" Chloe. In the crowd, feeling the looks from all around, Chloe smiled awkwardly, "That's right, Dad." What else does the manager want to say to these students? At this time, a group of people surrounded Lex and walked toward the elevator. "Mr. Lex." Gabe quickly left his job of receiving the students. "Oh? Today is a student visit day." Lex stopped, glanced at Clark, and raised a smile on his lips. "Gabe, let me show them around." He is very curious about Clark's current strength. The big boss spoke, and Gabe nodded in agreement. Lex turned to his assistant and ordered, "Lena, go bring them over and let them take the elevator up. I'll wait for them on the 4th floor." "Everyone." Lex's assistant had no good temper. The old woman said with a slumped face, "Put all the electronic equipment you carry in the storage box. Taking pictures and running around are not allowed in the factory." This lady?" Clark took the opportunity to ask, "I heard the factory once had a 3rd floor. Is that true?" The assistant shook his head without hesitation, "No, it's a rumor." "Okay, everyone, come with me, let's take the stairs." A large group of people followed the assistant into the elevator. Shortly after they left, the black man Earl pushed open the iron door of the storage room and turned towards the emergency passage on the other side. He walked through countless corridors filled with iron pipes and walked upstairs that smelled of rust. Soon, the black man reached the door of the 3rd floor. "Who?" He took a deep breath and turned the doorknob. "Kaka." As the iron door opened, what came into view was a small locker. This is impossible." Earl's emotions were instantly ignited by the scene before him. He broke into the storage room like crazy and kept rummaging through it. However, except for a white wall and a cold iron frame, there was nothing else in the room. "This is impossible." The only hope was shattered. Earl's eyes turned red, and the black man beat the cold wall crazily. His future, his hope, are all gone. With a twisted mentality, Earl couldn't accept this fact. The black man muttered, "No, there must be a 3rd floor." His hand went to his suit pocket. A dark American IAI pistol was held in Earl's hand. The black man's eyes were full of confusion, and he stretched out his thick palm to rub the gun body. "Kaka." With the bullet loaded, Earl showed a broken smile, "No, there must be hope. They must have hidden the 3rd floor. 4th floor." Students, notebooks in hand, gathered in a large office on the 4th floor of the factory. The surroundings are full of sophisticated equipment, and a group of scientists in white coats are monitoring various parameters on the computer. "Everyone, welcome to Luther Group." Lex led everyone around with his hands behind his back. "This is the command center of the factory. 100,000 tons of animal waste are processed here every year." Lex smiled evilly, licked his teeth and said, "I hope you don't bring any flammable materials, otherwise everyone will be blown up." There was echoing laughter from the crowd. but Clark was the only one with a sad look on his face. He was a little worried about whether Earl could successfully infiltrate. Whoosh! A crash of steel interrupted Lex's speech. The bald and overbearing president glanced at Gabe. "Manager, go and see what's going on." Gabe stepped toward the source of the sound, a locked iron door. Wow! Before Gabber could get closer, the iron door was knocked open. The tall, strong black man with a fierce look stretched out his hand to grab Gabber's neck, then raised the dark muzzle of the gun and pressed it against Gabber's temple. The man didn't even react before he was choked by the black man and subdued. The classmates were also frightened and overwhelmed by this sudden scene. Only Chloe screamed in horror, "Dad!" The next second, many people came to their senses and realized that they had been kidnapped. Some timid girls even cried out of fear. Clark also roared, "Earl, what are you doing?" At this moment, Clark's heart was full of regret. He should not have been so generous with his kindness. Clark decided to prevent the tragedy he had caused. The boy swung his arms and opened his legs. He started to move at great speed in a millisecond. Everything around him seemed to freeze and slow down. Clark ran towards Earl and stretched out his right hand to grab Earl's gun-holding arm. Snapped! At the moment of skin contact, the kryptonite flowing in Earl's body burst out with dazzling green light. "Ah!" Clark yelled before being easily pushed down by Earl. Bang! Clark fell to the floor in embarrassment, but the crowd was in chaos at this moment, and no one noticed Clark's abnormality. People were screaming and crying. "Shut up!" Earl yelled at the crowd, silencing all the noise. His voice was low and hoarse, and he yelled at Gabe, "Gabe, you are the manager here, you should know where the third floor is, take me there. Otherwise, I will shoot you with a gun." Now he just wants to recover, and he can easily give up the lives of others. "Father!" Chloe in the crowd clenched her fists. The girl subconsciously wanted to rush forward to rescue her father, but Lex grabbed her wrist. He lowered his voice and said, "You go through the emergency door at the back. The password is 1017. Go to the basement level to find Gino. Hurry!" Chloe rolled her eyes and suppressed the fear in her heart. She nodded and moved back carefully. "Hey, your name is Earl, right?" Lex stepped forward to attract Earl's attention, his bald head full of arrogance. "Since you want to kidnap someone to find the third floor, why don't you find a hostage of sufficient weight?" Earl alerted, "Who are you?" Lex puffed out his chest, "I am Lex Luthor, the owner of this factory. Thanks to the boss who crossed the deadline for the 200 points reward, thank you boss." Chapter 67, Remember in the next life, don't mess with Luthor, additional update for noontime boss. Luthor family. The black man suddenly became furious. It's all because of the Luthor family. He pushed Gabe away and hit Lex hard on the cheek with the butt of the gun in his hand. Bang! The huge force knocked down Lex, and the bald man fell down and spat out blood on the floor. The blow just now left his mouth ulcerated and injured. "But it's just right." Earl walked towards Lex with a ferocious smile and pointed the gun at Lex's head, "Lead the way and take me to the entrance of the third floor." Lex endured the burning pain in his cheek, his mind racing. He had no idea there was a third floor building in the factory. But now the black man Earl is in a bad state and is on the verge of a crazy collapse. The first thing he has to do is to stabilize the opponent's emotions. At the same time, a strategy was used to lead the black man to Kino's location. Lex rolled his eyes and pretended to be weak. "First, the third floor has been evacuated. Then where is it now?" With Lex's confirmation, Earl was even more convinced of his judgment. The damn Luthor family had indeed concealed the specific location of the room. The saliva sprayed on Lex's bald head. He lowered his head and said with a faint look in his eyes, "The third floor has been moved to the basement level, which is in the elevator. The speed is too slow and the power is too small." Bang! The sharp and swift fist hit the pale and withered cheek hard. The zombie-like Bizarro collapsed on the cold iron plate, covering the side of his face with one hand, looking up at Gino with aggrieved eyes. "Uncle Gino, bad." Listening to Bizarro's weird accent, Gino helplessly raised his forehead. "Shut up, Bizarro, call me Gino." "But..." Gino ignored Bizarro, picked up the water glass on the ground and took a sip. "Did he?" A cold electronic sound sounded in the empty laboratory. Gino turned his head, and through the huge explosion-proof door that slowly rose, he saw an anxious Chloe standing outside the iron door with her fists clenched and tears in her eyes, waiting. "Chloe! Gino frowned and looked at Bizarro. Go back to your room, Bizarro. Bizarro obeyed Gino, and his figure flickered and disappeared like a breeze. After Bizarro left, Gino also walked towards the door. How does Chloe know the password to the underground base? Gino frowned, thinking about the reason. Did Lex tell her? Bang! Reaching out and pressing the door close button to block the iron door from opening and revealing the secret of the laboratory, Gino leaned over and rushed out of the laboratory at an extremely fast speed. Bang! The electronic door that was originally opened dropped again. Chloe! The boy's soft voice sounded from behind Chloe. The girl was startled by Gino suddenly standing behind her, and even bit her lip out of panic. But the next second, the girl seemed to have found her backbone and threw herself into Gino's arms, bursting into tears. Gino, please, save my father. What happened to your father? Gino wanted to push Chloe away, but looking at the crying girl, he silently lowered his arm. Big tears wetted Gino's shirt. He patted Chloe on the back and asked as patiently as possible, tell me quickly, otherwise how can I help you? He remembered that Chloe's father was the factory manager, and then thought that the girl actually knew the password to the laboratory. A bad guess came to mind. Sure enough, when he heard Chloe's next words, Gino's guess was confirmed. Yes, it was a murderer from Metropolis who sneaked into the factory. He held the visiting students hostage and pointed a gun at my father, and your brother was among them. Now they are on the 4th floor. Clark tried to stop Earl, but was knocked down. Chloe babbled, but strangely she did not wait for Gino's response. The girl raised her head worriedly, only to see a face as cold as ice. His blue eyes were filled with murderous intent, and Gino stood there silently with his lips slightly lowered. However, this invisible silence was like a huge mountain pressing down on Chloe, preventing her from opening her mouth to speak. Kino. Croy swore that he had never seen Gino with such an expression. That pretty face contained violent murderous intent, silently venting the anger at the moment. Kaka. There was a heartbreaking sound of bones exploding, but it was just the sound of the young man slowly clenching his fist. Gino slowly raised his head and looked above his head. His eyes passed over the solid concrete floor, past the complicated lines and steel pipes, and finally locked on the elevator that was being lowered by a steel cable. In the elevator, a familiar figure was being pointed at the temple by a black man with a gun, and the two seemed to be having a heated conversation. Gino glanced at the elevator shaft and had an idea in his mind. The elevator slowly headed towards the negative floor. Earl's hands were shaking unconsciously. Soon, he would recover soon. Boom! A heart-wrenching vibration exploded in the elevator room. What? Earl raised his head nervously. It seemed like something jumped from the 2nd floor to the elevator. The black man drew his gun and pointed it at the iron plate above his head. No matter what you are, I warn you. Lex Luthor is in my hands. Boom! There was another crisp sound, and this time, the sound seemed to be getting closer. Get away! Earl roared, pulling the trigger overhead. Bang bang bang! 3 bullets sprayed out from the muzzle of the gun, whizzing through the iron and disappearing into the darkness above their heads. In the deep silence, everything seems to have returned to tranquility. Dead. Earl breathed a sigh of relief, but deep down he even felt that he was a little too nervous. Bang! Before Earl could take a breath, 5 slender fingers suddenly pierced the iron sheet above his head. Tear! The 2 hands on top of his head easily tore through the iron sheet, and then Earl saw a pair of blue eyes glowing with blue light. Buzz! The cold light hit Earl's right arm immediately, freezing his entire arm at a speed visible to the naked eye. My hand! Earl let out a miserable wail. The thick freezing ray might only sting Superman slightly, but when placed on Earl, who was only of average physique, it was tantamount to stripping him naked and throwing him into the Arctic glacier. Heavy ice wrapped Earl's entire arm, and the pistol was also wrapped in ice. From a distance, it even looked like a work of art full of violent aesthetics. Snapped! Gino jumped out of the elevator along the torn crack. The boy glanced at Lex, who had blood on the corner of his mouth, and a haze flashed in his eyes. Gino raised his head, looked down at Earl, and stretched out his right hand and slowly opened it. Earl's eyes widened. I saw 3 flat bullet slugs lying on the broad palm. How can this be? Earl was absent-minded for a while. He thought of the scene in the hospital again, and his eyes were full of fear. You are a devil. Bang! Earl's response was an iron hand holding his chin. Kaka! There was a heartbreaking sound of bone cracking, and Gino actually crushed Earl's jaw alive. Woo! Mixed with blood and broken teeth, Earl's tongue trembled and he made an indistinct sound. Be good, open your mouth and eat them. With a smile on his face, Gino put the bullet in his hand into Earl's mouth, and pinched Earl's neck to make him swallow the bullet. It's okay to throw things around. Not a good nigga. Watching Earl eat the warhead, Gino looked thoughtful, then pointed at Lex and said. You punched my brother, now I'm going to punch you, is it fair? Earl shook his head wildly, knowing the consequences of being punched by Gino. Ignoring the pleading and whimpering black man, under Earl's desperate gaze, Gino slowly raised his right fist, his eyes filled with plainness. Remember, in the next life, don't mess with Luther. Well, in fact, the purpose of this plot is the growth process of the protagonist and Clark. From chapter 30, it has been foreshadowing the conflict between the protagonist and Clark. One is decisive and decisive, the other is innocent and kind, and then uses the disaster caused by Clark in the factory incident to ignite explosive barrel, uses the conflict between two people to completely break out to promote the change and growth of the character's mentality. After all, it is better to teach people 1,000 words than to teach them once. Today's 4 chapters are completed, over. Chapter 68, I want to make a date with Superman. Blood, broken bones, teeth, tofu. These things are like the paint splashed by a painter, like the improvised graffiti of an artist. They are scattered throughout the elevator, and together they create a beautiful picture called death. Lex expressionlessly flicked a piece of flesh that fell on his black suit. Although he tried to stay calm, his pale cheeks and rolling Adam's apple revealed the bald man's current state of mind, and he felt sick. Witnessing a living person's head being blown off is no less than a horrific torture and nightmare for anyone. Gino. Lex spoke with difficulty and glared at Gino. Next time you kill someone, don't do it in front of me. Well, Mr. Lai is kind-hearted and doesn't want people to die in front of his eyes. Gino didn't answer, but stretched out his hands to hold the elevator door. Jumping down from the elevator shaft on the 2nd floor and then ruthlessly entering the elevator room, this delicate elevator obviously cannot withstand this level of damage and has fallen into a strike state. Roughly pulling open the iron door. The number on the electronic display above the head stayed at 1, and with the heart-wrenching sound of steel friction echoing, the elevator opened, and Gino and Lex walked out of the elevator. Gino. The expected person appeared on the 1st floor, with an awkward smile on his face, obviously feeling guilty for the trouble he had caused. When the boy caught a glimpse of the tragic situation in the elevator, the smile that originally hung on his face condensed. The awkward smile was still on his face, but Clark stood there blankly. Even in summer, his limbs felt cold. He was stunned by the scene in front of him. This was Clark's first time witnessing the horror of death. Not long ago, after Earl kidnapped Lex and left, Clark's extraordinary physique did not take long to recover as before. At that time, there was only one thought in his mind: stop Earl. But when Clark used his clairvoyance ability to catch up with the elevator, he saw blood-stained elevator, headless corpse. Horrible and disgusting images constantly impacted Clark's mind. The result was very different from what he imagined. Poor Earl, the black uncle who often taught him singing in his childhood, has now turned into a headless corpse, and even the human trachea can be seen from the bloody neck. The right arm frozen by the ice and the broken elevator made Clark easily guess what was going on. Gino tore open the elevator, restrained Earl with his frozen vision, and then punched the black man in the head. And it's not a good thing if a person's brain is too developed. Clark can easily construct scenes in his imagination, and then his brain can't accept such a bloody picture. Vomit. Clark's stomach was churning and he lay on the ground retching subconsciously. Clark couldn't understand that Gino could stop Earl in other ways. But why did the other party kill this poor black man? Why are you so calm? Clark glared at Gino with the same eyes as a murderer. The young man spread his hands. Then what should I do? Make a gesture of repentance? I don't think I was wrong. Gino sneered, shook off the blood beads on his hand, and accused mercilessly, besides, what qualifications do you have to question me? If my guess is correct, this damn black man should have been hiding in your house last night, right? Gino said sharply, and the reason why he can avoid the company's security check may also be because of your help. See what you did. Bringing an extremely mentally unstable madman into a dangerous chemical plant. Gino took a step forward, put one hand behind his back, and pointed to the body in the elevator with one hand, that crazy black man pointed a gun at my brother, just to find the legendary third floor. You put everyone at risk and naively thought you had the power to control the situation. But you'll just mess it up and live like Hamlet in contradiction. You haven't thought about what would happen if your black uncle friend didn't find the answer he wanted. Gino retracted his right hand, extended his index finger and raised his thumb, making a shooting gesture towards his temple. Bang! Gino spit out the syllables of shooting. He injected Clark coldly, when the time comes, my brother will die, and this is all due to your kindness. But he didn't shoot. Clark stood up slowly, resisting the desire to vomit and opened his mouth to retort. Gino snorted, that's me nipping the danger in the cradle in advance. Clark took a deep breath and slowly clenched his fists, so, this is the reason why you kill people wantonly. His death is your choice, Clark. Gino stared at Clark and said word by word, you can ask for my help. But you didn't. You preferred to believe Earl's story. In your opinion, this black man is more trustworthy than I am. So, you treat Earl with your choice, and I'll treat him with mine. Gino looked at Clark, his blue eyes scanning Clark's cheeks that were flushed with anger. Do you remember the first time we talked about justice? I said that I will not let go of anyone who harms my family and friends. People. He bullied my family, my brother, and he deserves to die. And now? Gino no longer indulges in memories. He is half a head taller than Clark and his aura gradually becomes fiercer. You are like a moral saint asking me not to kill people. Even if this person may take away the lives of my relatives, you still want me to stand by and watch. Clark? Gino's tone gradually became stronger. If the people being pointed at by the gun were your parents, would you still be able to say such righteous words? Gino didn't even have to guess. If Martha was really held at gunpoint, what he would do was no different from his own. Clark was speechless. He subconsciously recalled the scene of Martha being kidnapped. Then, Clark felt his cheeks were hot and could not speak. If his loved ones were kidnapped and he was extremely angry, he might make the same choice as Kino. So. Gino sighed, looked at Clark, and said word by word, your double standards make people laugh. After the words fell, the atmosphere between the two gradually became silent. The original shame turned into shame and anger. Lies won't hurt, the truth is the sharpest knife. Gino's words were heartbreaking. Clark's chest was heaving violently, and he was constantly breathing heavily. Yes, Kino. Clark became angry and yelled, you are always right, and you always have a lot of reasons to explain why you are right. But Earl was also my friend, and you killed him. Gino chuckled with contempt, stared at Clark with a hint of provocation, and slowly said, that's because he deserves to die. See what he did. He broke into a fertilizer factory filled with dozens of tons of ammonium nitrate with a firearm. If the firearm went off, half the town would be razed to the ground. So, I don't think I was wrong to kill him. Everyone's life is in his hands. If he doesn't die, who will die? Gino looked at Clark coldly, are you going to die for him? Clark was speechless. He clenched his hands tightly, making a sound of bones twisting. The young man's strong self-esteem prevented Clark from lowering his head and admitting his mistakes. Gino didn't care about Clark's reaction. He pointed at his eyes and said, look at the red bloodshot eyes. What's wrong? The boy smiled and raised his fist, do you want to fight me? Use force to make me accept your childish and ridiculous worldview. Thanks to Ash and Fall for the 500-point reward, thank you guys. P.S. I have been reading Gotham comics recently, looking for some interesting material, and mature readers should learn to recommend some interesting comics or animations to the author on their own. Beep quietly, forget about the movie, except for director Jia, Warner executives, they are just a bunch of idiots who are just trying to make money. They have to imitate Marvel's popcorn style. Are DC superheroes popcorn style? Warner, you don't understand. What does Dong Shi Xiaoqian do to make money? The director of the factory shows his face with emoticons. Chapter 69 The Battle Between Supermen. Anger. It's a wonderful emotion. It inspires people's courage and makes cowardly people brave to explode. It is a violent beast hidden in the hearts of living things. It only takes a word, an action, or even a look to awaken this ferocious beast. A one-story building at the moment. There were 3 people and 1 corpse standing in this empty hall used to receive guests. Lex moved towards the emergency exit. Being a smart man, he planned to go to Bizarro with both hands prepared. No one noticed Lex, and of course, if they did, no one would care. Gino and Clark looked at each other, and they only had each other in their eyes. There is certainly no ambiguity in this sentence. Each other knows each other's strength, and of course they know who is the real opponent. Clark? Gino's hands were hanging naturally, as if he was not nervous about the upcoming battle. He even had the heart for small talk. You think I'm preaching to you, but have you ever thought about it? Gino raised his arm and slowly clenched his fist. The air flowed out between the fingers, making a whining sound because of the speed. The young man completed what he had not finished before, I'm just telling the truth. Gino's words completely angered Clark, and Clark's hands even trembled slightly because of his anger. So, you always thought I was a fool, reckless, ignorant, and impulsive, right? Gino didn't speak, but glanced around Clark with his eyes full of pity, as if he was saying silently, yes, that's it. Besides, even your decision to beat me up is extremely stupid. Gino spoke again, pointing to his chest, with a self-deprecating look on his face. I learned to ride horses from the age of 6, and from the age of 7 to 9 I was taught by Ms. Siwa, the most powerful fighting master in the world. I have the best teachers in the world and the most powerful gifts. I can even give up freezing sight to fight you. The only outcome for you is to lose. Gino still looked calm. With the strength of a Kryptonian, why does he need to learn fighting skills? That's because Gino has never forgotten that in the near future, General Zod will descend on Earth with a group of Kryptonian outlaws. He has been planning his future since he was very young and has never slacked off. Because Gino understands that with the same talent, the only thing left to compete is who works harder. Gino held his chest high and his head high, asking like a graceful medieval nobleman, so, tell me your choice, Clark. Call. Clark lowered his head, his peripheral vision passing over Earl's headless body, and his already angry mood rose again. Clark roared out his plan, I'm going to beat you up. With just a slight exertion, Clark's figure flashed like a bolt of lightning and rushed towards Gino. He raised his right fist and hit Gino hard on the cheek. However, Gino just tilted his head slightly and dodged Clark's fist. Just as Gino thought, with the same talent, the only thing that competes is combat experience. I got knocked down 100 times in Ms. Siwa's first class. You know, my reaction speed was no longer slow at that time, but I was still easily knocked down by that woman. However, the suffering he suffered at that time gave Gino unparalleled fighting experience. He could even figure out the opponent's next attack just by looking at the movement of Clark's legs. Gino easily dodged Clark's fist, and his upper body and legs worked together to move around and avoid Clark's fist. If you zoom out and slow down, it's like a very unfair boxing match. It's like a budding rookie shaking his fist at an experienced boxer. Hoo! Clark kept shaking his fist. At normal speeds, the battle between the two is just 2 after images that are constantly entangled. Panting heavily, Clark gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his forehead. Thousands of fist swings made him sweat profusely. His physical fatigue was bearable, but Clark couldn't accept Gino's reaction. Facing his all-out attack, Gino easily dodged it. It seems to confirm what Gino said, you have no chance of winning. Another fist with strong wind was easily dodged by Gino. Clark broke through the defense and roared, can you only dodge? After listening to Clark's words, Gino sighed. Turning his head again to avoid Clark's straight right punch to the cheek, the young man said indifferently, you asked for this. Before he finished speaking, Gino no longer avoided, his legs stood on the floor of the hall, and his hands that were originally behind his back suddenly came out. Snapped. An arm clasped Clark's arm, and then Gino pulled suddenly. Huge power was transmitted from his arm, and Gino's swift attack even left Clark with no time to think. Seeing Clark being dragged down by him with a panicked look on his face, Gino unceremoniously raised his right knee. Bang! A fierce knee strike landed heavily on Clark's tender abdomen. The severe pain made Clark frown and his whole body bowed like a prawn. But Gino did not stop his offensive. The boy raised his elbow and punched Clark on the back again. Bang! Another swift blow hit Clark's back. The swift attack was like a skillful combination of skills, making Clark unable to lift his head. Gino grabbed Clark's arm again and threw him over the shoulder, knocking Clark down neatly. Plop! Clark, who was still attacking fiercely a second ago, now fell to the floor in a state of disgrace, looking at the ceiling with eyes full of confusion and shame. Just like what Gino said, he lost. Whether it's speed, strength, or reaction, Kino far surpasses himself. Seeing Clark lying on the ground with a weak look on his face, Gino showed no mercy. He raised his fist and punched Clark on the cheek from a high position. The young man said while beating him, "What do you still want?" The whistling fist carried heavy power, like a hammer striking Clark's handsome face. Red blood flowed from Clark's nostrils. He had never had such a miserable day. How long? Another punch hit, and Clark's eyes were blurred at this moment, and after images appeared in everything in front of him. The eye circles are puffy and the ears are ringing. He seemed to see three Kenos waving their fists at him. To grow. Gino's roar rang in Clark's ears. Clark looked at the raised fist and knew the power contained in it. One last punch and he will die. Clark watched as the fist fell, grazing his cheek and shattering the concrete floor next to his ear, leaving a huge punch mark. This is for Lex. Clark heard Gino's voice, and his beautiful face was full of mockery. You survived, you should be grateful to yourself for saving Lex. This thing saved your life. Ignoring Clark, who was lying on the ground with blood all over his face, Gino rubbed his sore fists and slowly stood up. The young man walked away with a brisk voice, "We're settled, Clark." Chapter 70 Beautiful Sister-in-Law? Additional update. A hospital bed filled with the smell of disinfectant. Clark woke up faintly. The pain in his head reminded Clark that everything that had happened recently was so real. "Hey, are you awake?" Lana's voice sounded in her ears. The girl held an apple in her hand, flipping the fruit knife with her skillful hand to peel off the peel. Her big eyes were full of heartache. "You are too reckless." Clark was silent and was sent to the hospital, but what happened next? The boy asked, "What happened?" Lana fiddled with the knife in her hand and blinked with her big eyes. Luther Chemical Plant called the police, and then it was said that the prisoner shot and broke the elevator because of his excitement. After that, he lost control of the hardware and fell from a height and broke his head. Everyone is safe now, except for your head bleeding a little. Clark was silent as he listened to Lana's explanation. It seems that Gino has taken care of everything. Yes, the Luther family is always smart and shrewd. Uncle and aunt have been taking care of you. Martha went back to the farm to prepare dinner for you, leaving me here to watch you. But how did you get injured? Lana handed Clark the fruity-smelling apple. The girl has seen the performance of Gino and Clark. Both of them have extraordinary abilities, but they don't know exactly what can hurt Clark. Clark pursed his lips, and the boy in a hospital gown pressed his hands on the hospital bed and slowly sat upright. Looking into the goddess's eyes, Clark hesitated for a moment before telling Lana what happened between him and Gino. Oh my god! Listening to Clark's description, Lana couldn't help but cover her mouth. This is too much. Blasting the opponent's head off with one punch was so cruel that Lana simply couldn't imagine such a scene. You also feel that what Gino did is wrong, don't you? Clark's big eyes lit up, looking eager for recognition. However, to Clark's surprise, Lana shook her head after thinking seriously. No, Clark. Lana opened her teeth lightly and said, if I were Gino, I would probably choose tough measures to subdue the murderer. This is the best choice for everyone. She glanced at Clark cautiously, stretched out two fingers to pinch and described, actually, sometimes, you should be more cautious. Listening to Lana's words, Clark rarely answered, but lowered his head and stared at his hands. Does even Lana feel that she is wrong? Young Clark raised his head and looked at the scenery outside the window with confusion. Under the setting sun at the hospital, several birds were perched on a big tree, calling each other and emitting crisp calls. Clark knew that he had lost his friend Gino. Luther Castle. At the hall door, the maids in charge of cleaning bowed to say hello to the young heir. The girls' eyes met, silently discussing that Gino seemed to be in a bad mood today. Gino nodded indifferently, picked up the milk brought by the blonde maid and drank it in one gulp. Call. Exhaling a breath, Gino threw himself into the sofa and closed his eyes slightly. There were too many things that happened today, which made him mentally exhausted. A faint scent of perfume invades your breath. Immediately afterwards, Gino felt himself being hugged from behind, and a pair of soft white arms pressed against Gino's chest. They follow the trajectory all the way down. Snapped. Gino slowly opened his eyes and gently clasped the mischievous little hands. Through the TV series on the LCD screen right in front, a woman with a good figure wearing a black dress was hugging Gino with a charming look on her face. I'll give you 3 seconds, let go of me. Jino said cold words with an expressionless face, and the majesty in it made the woman's eyes flash unnaturally. She subconsciously let go of her hand and stroked the goosebumps on her arms, her eyes full of surprise. Why would she obey a little brat? But the woman quickly adjusted herself. She flicked her long wavy golden hair, with a charming look on her face. She lightly opened her red lips to reveal 2 rows of white teeth, and stared at Jino with her beautiful big eyes. She moved her long legs, swaying her curvy figure, and sat gently on the sofa next to Jino. She lowered her voice, trying to create an ambiguous atmosphere. I didn't expect your attitude towards me to be so bad. Jino ignored the woman, just picked up the unfinished milk on the table and took a sip. He glanced at the woman with a sneer. Victoria, what do you have that deserves my respect? A stupid woman who has nothing but beauty but only sells her looks to get what she wants. Jino made no secret of his disdain for Victoria. He stared at the pale-faced woman and said, I don't care if you were sent by Lionel to test Lex, or whether you were sent by the Harvey family to steal business secrets. That's between you and Lex. Things in between. Don't try to tease me, I'm not interested in business. With the power of a god, how could Jino care about so-called wealth? After saying this, Jino stood up without mercy and returned to his room. Lying on the spacious bed, Jino sighed quietly. Victoria's information flashed through her mind. This beautiful woman's name is Victoria Harvey. The Harvey family has always been a competitor of the Luther family. It seems that the sudden visit of this old man's ex-girlfriend may bring a new round of tests to Lex with the orders of the Harvey family, or with Lionel's will. It is the so-called honeypot, which is used to test whether the future successor of the family can resist the temptation of beauty and other tricks. However, these people underestimate Lex too much. There was a sneer on Jino's lips. He was ready to watch Lex battle wits with these idiots. Smallville Township Police Department. In the evidence room, the police officers stood in a row without breathing, like soldiers undergoing review. There was no other reason. In the evidence room, there was a fat woman wearing a suit and tie standing. Her dark skin proved her identity as a black person. It is said that this woman is a big shot who came out of the White House and has worked for the FBI, CIA, and other large violent institutions. In a small town, hundreds of people die every year for all kinds of weird reasons. Amanda stared at the various photos on the wall. The shriveled mummies, the electrocuted car mechanic, and the headless corpse that recently died at the Luther factory. These mysterious and weird events are what attracted her to the small town. Amanda picked up the documents on the table and flipped through them. Her well-informed brain quickly led her to conclude that this report was full of loopholes. It is impossible for an elevator to fall and hit someone on the head to cause such an injury. Amanda looked at the bloody photo and sneered from her thick lips, it's more like being hit in the head with a heavy-duty Barrett at close range. She picked up the missing Julie file on the table again, with an inexplicable look on her face. The day before the girl disappeared, a deceased person died in the town because he lost 98% of his body fat. Amanda lowered her eyes and thought, these missing persons are concentrated in Smallville High School, or they are related to the Luther chemical plant. Looking at these weird and mysterious cases, Amanda's eyes flashed with a strange light. As a lackey for the big shots in the White House, she knows the world is not as simple as it seems. Not long ago, she received an assignment to investigate the strange things that had happened in the small town of Smallville over the past few years. The woman's brown eyes glanced at the Luther factory case file, and a sneer appeared at the corner of her mouth. Let's start with this case. P.S. The 66th chapter I wrote this morning was a bit poisonous, mainly because it was deliberately pretentious for the sake of showing off, and ignored the logic of language and the conflict of opinions. Tonight, the details of the dialogue were modified to highlight the conflicts and psychological changes between the protagonists, letting logic get smoother and everyone can look back. Over. Chapter 71 Uninvited Guest. Saturday. Early morning. Lex was sitting at his desk busying himself. As the manager of a small-town chemical plant, Lex is busy. Master Lex. The old butler, in a neat suit, knocked on the door and walked into the desk after receiving permission. There is a woman outside the manor who calls herself Amanda Waller and wants to see you. She said she wants to consult you about the Luther factory. Amanda. Lex frowned, and his originally careless sitting posture became slightly straighter. As a member of the upper class of free America, Lex had naturally heard of Amanda Waller's name. The fat mad dog, the loyal dog of high officials, the black glove of the government. These are all labels on Amanda. Simple, obedient, and easy to use, these are the reasons why Amanda can reach a high position. Of course, maybe there is a little bit of black skin magic added. However, if you don't have strong strength, you won't even be qualified to be a dog for those officials. Amanda is such a person. In addition to being loyal to her owners, she is also a good biter. And now, this difficult guy has come to the town, which undoubtedly makes Lex feel a little nervous. Generally speaking, when Zeben wants a person to disappear, he can do it by paying some money and hiring some killers. But this is not universally applicable to politicians. After all, beating a dog depends on the owner, and Amanda's owners are all in high positions. Eliminating Amanda on a physical level will only turn each other against each other. Lex said no more and waved his hand to signal the butler to leave. Not long after the man left, Victoria, wearing a nightgown, walked into the study with a faint smile on her face. She had been eavesdropping outside the house before. It seemed that her ex-boyfriend had hidden many secrets. She said, "You look like you are in trouble, do you need my help?" Lex smiled at the woman, "Oh, dear, if you can, please help me calm Gino down." Victoria sneered in her heart, but she said with tea-talk, "Maybe I can help you with such a small matter, so you don't need to trouble Gino, right?" Victoria held a grudge against Kino's words that humiliated her in the evening. The woman finally found the opportunity and frantically applied Kino's eye drops in front of Lex. "I know, but let's calm him down." Lex smiled and blocked what the woman wanted to say. A shrewd woman knew better than to be in a hurry. She smiled, winked at Lex, then twisted her waist and walked towards her brother-in-law's room. Watching Victoria leave, the smile on Lex's face disappeared immediately, so fast that even in the blink of an eye. Lex stared at Victoria's back coldly, gestured with his fingers on the table, and slowly said a short word, "Idiot." He knew what this woman's true purpose was. But just as Gino guessed, Lex didn't mind playing with this stupid woman, just treating it as a pastime while building up strength. But the other party's behavior of slandering Gino still made Lex angry. Lex. It was rare that he slept in but was pulled up from the bed by the cheap guy. Gino played with the kryptonite in his hand and walked down the stairs. He complained dissatisfiedly, "Why did you wake me up so early? Kino, we are in trouble." Lex put his chin on his hands and looked at Kino and said, "Amanda has come to the town and has set her sights on us." Gino shrugged, sat down at the table opposite Lex, and glanced outside the door, where a black skirt was looming. He lowered his voice, "Are you worried about the things we hide in the chemical plant?" "That's right." Lex pursed his lips, "This woman is not greedy for money, she is only passionate about power. If she insists on investigating, our plans on this land will be ruined and divided up by the people in the White House." "No, no one can take away our things." Gino interrupted Lex, holding the side of his face with one hand, looking at the serious Lex with amusement, stretched out his finger and tapped the cheap man. "Say it, Lex, what do you want me to do for you?" He didn't believe that the scheming Lex would be helpless. Perhaps Lex had already found solutions to hundreds of problems when he learned of Amanda's arrival. Lex was silent for a moment, and a cold light flashed through his dark green eyes, "Just wait and see what happens. If this woman insists on getting to the bottom of it." He smiled, and the smile was quite strange and cruel, "Then, I will send a small gift to her neck." On a black Lincoln sedan. Smelling the incense in the car, Amanda quietly stared at the historic castle not far away through the car window. As a dog in the White House, Amanda knows the importance of conglomerate giants like the Luthor family in the United States. There is an unspoken line between the chaebol and the powerful, that is, each other will exercise restraint, cooperate and fight with each other. But the heir to such a behemoth is willing to live in a barren town. Thinking about the strange murders in the town for a long time, Amanda felt that there was a thick layer of fog in front of her eyes and she couldn't see clearly. She stretched out her thick tongue and licked the corner of her mouth, like a greedy big toad. The more mysterious this existence is, the more it stimulates her research thoughts. What is the secret hidden under the town by the Luthor family? She couldn't wait to dig in. She's very good at this. Politicians are filthy from head to toe. Doo-doo. There was a knock on the car window and the driver lowered the window. The white-haired old housekeeper of the Luthor family was in a suit and leather suit. "Ms. Amanda, the Luthor family welcomes you." "Okay." Amanda smiled, but the gloomy smile also had a hint of scheming. She simply regained her composure, moved her chubby body out of the car, and followed the old housekeeper into the castle. In the hall, several maids have prepared black tea for guests. The ancestors of the Luther family crossed the ocean from England to the American continent, and the habit of drinking black tea continues to this day. Looking at the fork and spoon made of gold, Amanda sneered in her heart, these luxurious vampires are really rich. She struggled to bend her knees and sit on the luxurious sofa. Her bloated figure made the sofa groan in pain, but fortunately it could withstand Amanda's weight. The fat black woman picked up the tea and took a sip. Two young men walked out of the hall. A bald young man with a serious expression and a calm face, and next to him was a young man with blonde hair and an ordinary face, but with an air of indifference to everything. Ms. Amanda, welcome. Lex said like a qualified businessman, with a bright smile on his face. But the blonde young man beside him sat unceremoniously on the sofa at the other end, without even looking at Amanda. Mr. Luther. Amanda looked away and stood up to hold the palm handed to her by Lex. Nice to meet you. Thank you to Mr. Mu Jianji for the 100-point reward. Thank you, Mr. Mu. P.S. Chapter 68 has been modified and Amanda Waller has been introduced. I think the Kryptonite Flower chapter is very boring to write, so you can jump and read it. Chapter 72 Who is the prey? Is such that. In the hall, Amanda stared at Lex with her brown eyes and said, thanks to Mr. President, I recently formed a group called the National Special Incident Response Team. This team is responsible for investigating all abnormal events occurring throughout the United States. And I noticed that there are hundreds of mysterious deaths in Smallville every year. I'm very curious. Amanda clasped her hands together, making a pressing gesture, and slightly bent her huge body to apply pressure, so I want to visit the Luther family. After all, as a leading local company, you may know some inside information. Lex did not answer Amanda, but looked at Gino. The two looked at each other, obviously having made up their mind. That's right, Ms. Amanda. Lex said with a smile, we did notice the anomalies in the town and set up a technology laboratory in our factory. And we have researched a lot of interesting items. Listening to Lex's confession, Amanda suddenly opened her little eyes, sparkling with brilliance. She licked her lips, as if she saw a sumptuous lunch. She didn't expect the plan to go so smoothly. Something that would allow the Luther family to invest in research must be very remarkable. She seemed to have seen more power and prestige beckoning to her. So. Amanda said patiently, her eyes full of greed, can you take me there? I want to visit. If it's valuable. Amanda began to paint the pie for Lex. I will pass this situation to the White House and ask the White House to fund your experiment. Lex showed an ecstatic expression, with excitement on his face. Really? Ms. Amanda, my experiment is too expensive. And my father is unwilling to help me. Of course, I keep my word. The smile on Amanda's face became even stronger. She didn't expect Lex to be so easy to deceive. This made the woman feel contempt in her heart. The Luther family? Nothing more. The woman has even planned her next plan in her heart. She will find some excuses to announce the illegal experiments at the Luther factory, and then seize the factory. After that, Lex's research results will belong to her. Then what are we waiting for? Lex stood up first, as if he couldn't wait to take Amanda to attract investment. Amanda smiled and stood up, not forgetting to grab her bag from the sofa. The woman glanced at Gino, who was sitting motionless on the chair, and couldn't help but wonder, isn't this child following you? Ah, my brother is deaf, don't worry about him. Lex said enthusiastically, come on, Ms. Amanda, I can't wait to show you the results. The woman nodded, and before leaving, she couldn't help but look back at Lex's deaf brother. However, there was no one on the sofa. The first floor of the Luther chemical plant. The elevator opened, and a huge and majestic metal door appeared in front of the group of people. Amanda's two bodyguards in suits looked alert, with their right hands on their gun holsters to guard against what might happen at any time. Sure enough, the Luther group knows the secrets of the town. Amanda sneered in her heart, watching Lex enter the computer password. Drop. The password was entered successfully, and the originally closed metal door slowly rose. Countless experimental cans are placed in an orderly manner on the huge base. Strange creatures soak in the jar. My God, what is that? The two bodyguards looked at a huge iron cage in the center of the experimental base with shocked expressions. There is a huge bat monster imprisoned there. Upon noticing the intruder, the bat monster opened its mouth full of fangs and roared at several people. Who? Looking at this extraordinary and mysterious creature, Amanda felt her breathing speed up and her whole body was extremely excited. No wonder, no wonder so many strange things happen in the small town. All the secrets seem to be in this laboratory. Then, what is that? Holding back her excitement, Amanda asked Lex. Lex explained, it's a vampire that absorbs human body fat. We've been studying her. Amanda looked up at the bat monster, confusion written on her face. Ms. Amanda. Lex's voice interrupted her thoughts. What did you say about investment? Oh, investment. Amanda showed an indifferent smile on her face and glanced at the bodyguards on the left and right. Two strong men flanked Lex on the left and right. Lex Luthor. Amanda's face was cold, and her original smile was gone. She said seriously, the Luthor group has brought danger to the safety of the residents of the town because of its illegal research on unknown creatures. Now let me inform you. Your group has been sealed. Amanda realized that she no longer wanted to wait. Seal the laboratory, report the news to your superiors, and receive a reward. You, how could you do this? Lex showed an unbelievable expression, you agreed to my investment. Haha. Amanda sneered and interrupted Lex, Mr. Lex, I believe this lesson can teach you to never believe what politicians say. Amanda said confidently, you are just my prey. You. Lex wanted to say something more. Okay, stop playing around, Lex, I have a test next Monday. A lazy voice sounded from behind Amanda. What? The two bodyguards looked like they had seen a ghost. The three of them turned around. In the corner, I saw a familiar blonde young man leaning against the cold wall, staring at the three of them with bored eyes. Next to him, Bizarro was squatting like a zombie, his eyes widened and he was trying to look angry. You, are you not mute? A bodyguard shouted what Amanda wanted to ask. That was just a bad joke, Lex. That's enough, what do you want to do? Amanda is not an idiot. How could a fat black woman who has been in politics for many years not know that she fell into Lex's trap? She took a step forward and stared at Gino menacingly. What do you want to do? Gino smiled, walked towards the three of them, and said in a brisk tone, from the very beginning when you entered the town, you have already come into the sight of the Luthor family. Gino sounded regretful, Lex plans to see what you will do. But you did not disappoint us. You are very ambitious and want to explore the secrets of this town. Even trying to get information from Lex. The distance between Gino and Amanda was getting closer and closer, and the woman couldn't help clenching her fists, her face cold. Back off. The two bodyguards saw that something was wrong. They raised their pistols and pointed the dark muzzles at Gino's head. However, the young man seemed to turn a deaf ear and still walked towards this direction. Fire! The bodyguard did not hesitate and pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet flew out along the barrel of the gun, and the tail of the bullet was dotted with flames to drive the airflow, whistling and spinning towards Gino. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. Gino slowly raised his palm. Bang! The solid copper warhead hit the white palm, as if it had hit steel. The originally round warhead was squeezed and deformed under the devastation of thrust and resistance. Da-da! The shriveled warhead fell and hit the iron plate at everyone's feet. Gino looked at the stunned three people with a smile on his lips. Now, who is the prey? Chapter 73 Farewell, Superman Season 1 completed or more updates. Underground base. Da-da! Gino walked slowly towards the three of them. He's not afraid of bullets. The black bodyguard rubbed his eyes hard. He couldn't believe what he saw. A high school student on campus blocked the deadliest firearm with just the palm of his hand. The twisted bullet casings on the ground proved that what they just saw was not an illusion. Black people don't believe in evil. Bang bang bang. There were several more gunshots, and they didn't even see the boy move. They just stretched out his hand slightly, and the bullets he fired were thrown to the ground again. Amanda's eyes were full of fear, and she tried to open her little eyes to see clearly how Gino did it. Call. Gino blew the dust off his palms and stood in front of the bodyguards. The young man smiled at the two of them, you look surprised. His words successfully brought the stunned bodyguard back to his senses, and the two black men rushed towards Gino with their fists waving. Oh, boring. Gino shook his head. The next second, two big hands suddenly grabbed the black man's neck, and then made their heads hit each other. Bang! Like an exploding watermelon, the broken head mixed with brains spilled onto Amanda's face. Ah! The woman screamed like a screaming groundhog. Shut up! Gino glanced at Amanda. The woman suddenly felt like a duck being pinched by the neck, biting her lips and not daring to make a sound. Jino threw away the two headless corpses in his hands. He looked at the blood on his hands and then shook off the blood beads. A few drops of blood traced a graceful arc in the air, and then landed on Amanda's lips. The faint smell of blood floated in the air. Amanda's pupils were dilated and she looked like she was in a daze. She was petrified. Women have always considered themselves to be brave and strong people. But today, after witnessing all this with her own eyes, her heart was shaken. An emotion called fear grew in Amanda's heart, which reminded her of her black father who ran away with his pants up when she was 6 years old. Fear was eating away at the woman's mind, and the desire to survive deep in her heart kept reminding her to do something. What should she do now? Resist? The two bodies on the ground are the best answer. Begging for mercy? Praying to a young high school student? Amanda was full of tangles in her heart. But, when a pair of blood-stained sneakers caught her sight, the so-called self-esteem and glory collapsed in an instant. Do not kill me! Amanda heard herself scream like a pig, and her knees, which she thought were strong, bent naturally and knelt on the ground. Amanda kept telling, I am the president's staff, a member of Congress, and the leader of the paranormal incident team. You can't kill me. She even considered the issue from the perspective of the Luthor family, and said in rapid succession, if I die, the White House will definitely send someone to investigate, and the town will be exposed to more and more people. The pair of sneakers slowly stopped. Then, bang! A sneaker stepped on Amanda's head hard, causing her head to be in close contact with the floor. The endless sense of humiliation made Amanda clenched her fists instantly, and she heard the blonde boy's voice, It's so interesting, Senator Amanda. I think what you said makes sense, so what do you think I should do? Amanda suppressed her anger, she unclenched her clenched fists, and said in a low voice, As long as you let me go, I am willing to serve the Luthor family. Ha ha ha! A burst of clear laughter sounded above the head. Jino looked at the fat black woman who was trampled under his feet, shook his head and said, But, Ms. Amanda, you just said that the words of politicians can never be trusted. Now you want me to let you go. Although I don't believe you. Jino leaned down and looked at the ugly woman, but I am a good person and I am willing to give you a chance. It just requires a small price. As he spoke, Jino gestured with his 2 fingers and smiled brightly, like a devil who had tricked people. He clapped his hands, and Bizarro, with a silly smile on his face, brought out a syringe. Jino knocked the needle and said with a smile, Please allow me to introduce it to you. Nano bomb. It's the familiar Black Lincoln again. Amanda turned her head sideways and stared out the window at the Luthor chemical plant with malicious eyes. The woman rubbed her thick neck, a trace of hatred flashed in her eyes. But immediately, she knocked on the car seat like a deflated rubber ball and signaled the driver to drive away. Ms. Amanda. The driver started the car and the Lincoln drove smoothly away from the factory. The black driver glanced at the woman in the rearview mirror curiously, How is the progress of your investigation? Amanda glanced at the driver and said expressionlessly, Nothing was found. Everything is normal in this town. On Monday. Jingle bell. As the exam bell rang, the students dropped their papers, cheered and screamed and rushed towards the corridor. The final test is over, and what awaits them next is a 2-month summer vacation. Gino and Chloe walked side by side. Since Kino broke off their relationship with Clark, Chloe and Peter have obviously followed different playmates. If permuted and combined, it is probably Gino Chloe. Clark Pitt. In the corridor. Chloe glanced at Gino with her peripheral vision. The girl hesitated for a moment and slowly asked, So, what are your plans for the summer vacation? Me? Gino shrugged, I don't know, maybe I'm staying in a small town. Before he finished speaking, the cell phone in his pocket rang. Taking out his mobile phone and looking at the phone number on the phone, Gino answered the call with an expressionless face. What's the matter? You should have a holiday, right? Lionel's voice came from the phone. He said slowly, Your mother recently wanted to go back to Gotham City to visit your grandfather, and she wants you to go with her. Gino was silent for a moment, and then responded, I understand. Gino hates his father, but he loves his mother. Wow, I didn't mean to hear it, but you are going to Gotham during the summer vacation. Chloe shuddered and said, Just hearing the word Gotham gives me goosebumps. What is Gotham? Many titles come to mind when people hear its name. Sin City, Devil's Land, anything related to chaos and evil can be affixed to Gotham City. It was a chaotic and evil place, everyone agreed. Yes, Gotham City. My mother wants to visit my grandfather. Gino took back his phone. He loved his mother, and naturally he would not let her go to a sinful place like Gotham alone. Chloe sighed, "Oh, I originally planned to invite you to the bonfire party next week, but it seems there is no chance." "There will always be a chance, Chloe." Gino smiled, lowered his head, and ruffled the girl's hair, "See you in the fall." Chloe lowered her head, but still cheered up and said with a smile, "Okay, I'll see you in the fall." Entering Gotham line tomorrow, long live my beloved Gotham. Chapter 74 Mother. Metropolis. Under the rich night sky, there are skyscrapers composed of countless neon lights. These colorful lights are intertwined and twinkling in the night, like a beautiful picture unfolding flatly. Just from the paint and body lines, you can tell that a black car that was expensive was parked slowly in front of a manor. A pair of long straight legs stepped lightly on the tiles in front of the manor. The young man in a black suit adjusted his tie on his chest. He slowly raised his head, with a trace of sadness in his eyes. Under the dark night, a gold-plated plaque hangs on the iron gate of the manor, Swaymore Asylum. Speaking of Swaymore Asylum, it is an authoritative institution with a long history. This mental hospital existed as early as the beginning of the development of the metropolis, but in that era there were few crazy people and the business of the mental hospital was sluggish. However, with the development of the times, the pace of life has become faster, and there are more and more lunatics in the city. The Swaymore Manor, which originally welcomed all comers, has also successfully transformed, they only serve the elite class. After the security guard at the door verified his identity, the closed iron door opened, and Gino stepped into the huge manor. The road is lined with blue flowers. Gino took off a bunch casually and walked into the manor castle. Security guards stood around the hall. The mentally ill people in hospital gowns are each obsessed with their own world. Some people just walked with their heads down, walking in a hurry, circling the hall. Some people were standing on tables, chairs, and benches, singing loudly and chanting unpleasant tunes. Kino walked through these mental patients and headed towards the second floor. Stepping on the wooden stairs to the second floor, Gino heard a melodious song echoing in the corridor. The song was soft and slow, like a mother singing a requiem for a child. Gino looked at the blonde woman leaning against the locked window with a complicated expression. That's his mother, Letitia Elliott. 4 years ago, he finally couldn't stand Lionel's endless cheating and quarrels. The flower who had grown up in a greenhouse since childhood chose to commit suicide. She jumped headfirst from the 4th floor of her home, and Kino caught her at the time. However, due to her height, the woman hit her head, and this was the root of her illness. This incident was like a thorn in Gino's heart, and it was also the root cause of the stiff relationship between him and Lionel. No one has a smooth life, even Gino, who has unlimited possibilities. After Letitia jumped from the 4th floor, she secretly found a deserted place and cried for a while. Gino looked at his mother. She touched the cold glass with one hand, as if she wanted to pick up the little flowers through the window. And her other hand was holding 2 little bear dolls tightly. Even wearing the smallest hospital gown could not hide her thin figure. The dark circles under the eyes prove that the woman's sleep quality is not good. There was a peaceful smile on her lips. When she heard the footsteps behind her, the woman turned her head. She saw the handsome young man walking towards her, and the woman's peaceful smile turned gloomy in an instant. She shouted and rushed towards Gino. "Leave, leave quickly." The woman made a driving gesture with her hands, waving her arms constantly to drive away the intruders. "This is my castle. No Lionel." "Mom." Gino reached out and clasped the woman's wrist, staring at the woman with the same eye color as his with blue eyes. "It's me, Gino. I'm here to see you." After listening to Gino's words, the woman tilted her head and looked at the 2 dolls in her hands. There was confusion in her eyes, but, "My 2 children are with me." As she spoke, the woman took out a piece of candy from the patient's pocket and stuffed it into the golden stuffed bear, stroking the toy's head with gentle eyes. "Your favorite candy, Gino?" Watching this scene silently, Gino sighed. "Why do you feel that little bear with no hair on its head is so pitiful?" "All right." He gave up his plan to let Letitia Elliott recognize that he was Gino. In the world of mentally ill people, only by obeying them can you achieve your goals. Kino put it another way. "I am Mr. Lauren Elliott's driver. I am here to take you back to Gotham." After listening to Gino's words, the woman's original vigilance disappeared, and she cheered like a little girl. "Father asked you to pick me up." "That's right." Gino took out a small crumpled blue flower from his pocket and handed it to Letitia with a smile. "Look, this is a small flower that is a specialty of Gotham. Don't you always like the flowers in Elliot Manor?" Gino glanced at the flower bed under the mental hospital. In order to make Letitia happy, he spent a lot of money to transplant and plant the flowers here from Gotham. Just to make Letitia happy. Letitia stretched out her little hand to take the blue flower in surprise. She smiled at Gino, then "Let's go." She waved her arms and ran towards the first floor. "Go home." "Yes." Gino followed the woman and said calmly, "Go home." Gotham. This cold and cold steel forest supports everyone in this city. The constant sound of gunfire under the night sky seemed to disturb the cold moon in the sky, casting a dark and hazy luster, illuminating the bleak face of the city of Gotham. Countless tall chimneys spewed grey-black gas into the air, giving every air in Gotham an unpleasant and pungent smell of soot. This is Gotham. Chaos, filth, evil, any disgusting, unfortunate, angry, sad adjectives can be found in this city. It is like a roaring beast in the night, devouring the soul of everyone in this city. This damn weather. A brown-haired man in a suit stood outside Gotham Airport. He looked at his watch and then at the airport exit. "In the wait that is not long but a man thinks it is long." A woman in a light blue dress jumped out of the hall, followed by a blonde boy. The people passing by were not surprised by Letitia's behavior. Because this is Gotham, there are a few lunatics and psychopaths popping up every day. "Letitia!" The brown-haired man shouted to the woman, "Come over here." "Thomas." Letitia tilted her head and looked at the brown-haired man. "It's me, Letitia." Thomas smiled, happy to see his only sister. "Uncle Thomas." Kino followed with his suitcase. Thomas glanced at Gino and sighed, "Kino, welcome to Gotham. By the way, when you go back, don't forget to tell me about my curse on Lionel." Gino shrugged, "I will, but he must not care." The three of them got into Thomas's car. Along the way, Letitia was like a curious child, picking up the glass and observing the surrounding scenes. In the front seat, Thomas was chatting with Gino. "I'm attending a banquet with me tomorrow night. I have a good friend I want to introduce to you." As his sister's favorite son, Thomas loves the house and the people, and wants to introduce his connections to Gino. Gino nodded and said, "I will, uncle." Chapter 75 The Origin of Gotham. Elliot Manor late at night. The old mansion in Gotham City's East End occupies a vast area. There are a few crows perched on some locust trees at the door. A black car drove slowly, disturbing the dormant raven. They flapped their wings and flew away, croaking, and their miserable screams once again added a bit of eerie charm to this silent manor. "Here we are." Thomas stopped the car and stared at this quaint manor with complex eyes. "To be honest, I haven't come back very often since I grew up. However." Thomas watched the excited Letitia run into the manor, put his hands on his waist and smiled, "This is a good place for mental patients to rest." Gino didn't respond, just stared at the manor. There were two stone owl statues placed at both ends of the iron gate at the entrance. He remembered that when he came here to visit his grandfather Lauren when he was a child, the rubies on the stone statues were still there. But now it has disappeared, which shows that the city's security environment is becoming increasingly chaotic. Thomas thought that Kino was worried about Letitia. He sighed and patted Kino on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I know many capable psychiatrists in this city. I think I can find someone to diagnose and treat Letitia." The two walked into the manor while talking about Letitia's condition. They were greeted by a white-haired old man. He was trembling and wielding a cane and bowing with great effort, "Heir of the Elliot family, welcome to your arrival. The master is already waiting for you inside." When he said this, the old man stared at Gino, as if the owner of this manor only wanted to see one person today. Thomas looked slightly unnatural when he heard the old butler's words. He shook his head, "Letitia and I are waiting for you outside." Gino frowned, and Lauren's appearance appeared in his memory. He was a tyrannical old man who always had a straight face and liked to yell and lose his temper. Gino had little interaction with him. When he was a child, he stayed here and played with Thomas. "Lead the way." Gino thought for a moment and decided to meet this unfamiliar grandfather. Push open the old wooden door. There was an expensive chandelier hanging from the ceiling of the living room, but it was already covered with dust. The messy knives and forks and leftovers on the dining table also silently tell the story of the Elliot family's past glory. Jino saw an old man in purple pajamas lying ill on the sofa. His skin is wrinkled, and his old cheeks and backs of his hands are covered with brown age spots. The old man's hair was sparse, saliva was dripping from the corners of his mouth, his eyes were closed, and he seemed to be dying. Master Luolun, Master Jino is here. The old butler's voice woke up Lauren. The half-buried old guy slowly opened his eyes, and looked at Jino carefully with his cloudy eyes. The old housekeeper left silently. Get closer, Lauren said to Jino. Jino took 2 steps, and as the distance got closer, he could smell the rotten smell exuding from Lauren's body. Time is such a terrible thing, taking away a person's life silently. Jino stopped. The next moment, Lauren suddenly stretched out his hand and clasped Jino's wrist. His eyes were full of envy, and he kept saying things like it's great to be young. What do you want from me? Jino shook off the old man. He didn't know what the old man had for lunch. Something sticky fell on his wrist, so Jino took out a tissue from his pocket and wiped his wrist. Hey! Looking at Jino's movements, Lauren let out a strange laugh and said, Don't dislike me, I called you here to give you a gift. Open the cabinet opposite. There is a small gift I prepared for you. Jino raised his eyebrows and followed the direction of his finger towards the cabinet in the corner. His eyes swept over the wooden cabinet. The closed wooden cabinet gradually became transparent in Jino's eyes. He saw a small silver box and an ordinary white bird-shaped mask placed in the cabinet. His eyes were slightly focused, focusing on the iron box. Jino's gaze easily penetrated the silver iron box. I saw a pool of silver-white flowing liquid contained in the iron box, which looked like melted silver. However, what surprised Jino even more was that the silver liquid was shining like the Milky Way. What is this? Kino is interested in a luminous liquid? The young man opened the cabinet and took out the iron box. Pap! As the iron box was opened, a pool of silver flowing liquid came into view. Sniff sniff! Jino sniffed lightly, but there was no smell at all from this thing. Tasteless! Jino labeled the mysterious liquid again. How is it? Lauren coughed, interrupting Jino's thoughts, isn't it beautiful and magical? What is this? Jino really didn't know what this thing was. Lauren stared at the iron box in Jino's hand and said, This thing is called amber gold, a metal that can prolong life and slightly enhance people's ability to heal themselves. You said it's metal. Jino raised his eyebrows, stretched out his hand to lick the liquid, and it felt cold, like a pool of spring water. Lauren grinned, showing his yellow teeth, Of course, I lived to the age of 95 with it. Jino was curious, So, how did you get it? How to get it? Jino's words seemed to ignite Lauren's anger. He stood up tremblingly, his voice hoarse, This thing belongs to our Elliot family. The old guy was so angry that he limped towards the wall with the curtains drawn. Then, he held down the black curtain and pulled hard. Look at these paintings. Jino looked at the wall. I saw several oil paintings hanging on the wall in the corner. The first painting shows 4 young people with their families on a sailboat. Each of them is high-spirited and looking at the sea, as if something is waiting for them somewhere. Ahem! Lauren coughed and pointed to the first oil painting, This is the origin of Gotham City. 4 ambitious young people traveled across the ocean together and came to the former Gotham, a wild place. The old man Lauren's eyes flashed with reminiscence, the Wayne family, the Elliot family, the Kane family, the Cobbett family. 4 founders of the family founded Gotham City. Kino's eyes moved to the second oil painting. The second oil painting has a strange appearance. It is split in the middle of the frame, and the upper part is a city. Above the large cities, a young man was looking down at the entire city with his arms crossed. The lower part is an intricate pipe, with a hall hidden inside. There were several chairs placed in the hall, and the leading figure was shrouded in darkness, holding his chin with both hands, as if he was talking to his companions. Lauren's voice rang in his ears, After founding Gotham, the Wayne family loved this city. They wanted this city to develop freely, so that everyone could get education and everyone could have enough to eat. Create a city without hunger and poverty. But our ancestor Elliot didn't think so. He created an organization called the Owl Council, attracted powerful local forces to join, and expected that the city's development direction would be determined by prominent families like them. Listening to Lauren's words, Jino's face gradually became weird. Good guy, why do the Elliot family sound so like the villains? Chapter 76 Everything will be mine, more updates. Lauren is still talking about the origins of Gotham City. He told Kino how the Court of Owls grew bigger and stronger under the leadership of the Elliot family, and became a behemoth that shrouded Gotham City. Lauren closed her eyes in confusion and murmured, "Beware of the Court of Owls, they will monitor your travels at all times." A peek into Gotham City from the dark, hidden in the attic with low walls. He is with me when I dwell in my home, and when I lie down and in my bed, he is with me. Don't ever mention his name, or the sharp claws will come after you. Lauren opened his eyes, looked at Gino who looked indifferent and said, "This nursery rhyme spread in Gotham is not a lie. The wealth and power of the Court of Owls are far beyond your imagination. They have Gotham's most powerful assassins at their disposal to eliminate those standing in the way of the Court of Owls." So. Gino ignored Lauren's praise of the Court of Owls and focused his attention on the last scene. On that picture scroll, a downcast figure hunched out of the dark hall. The young man stared at Lauren with his blue eyes and said, "Has the Elliot family been expelled from the Court of Owls?" Gino's words caused Lauren to fall into silence. His face turned red and he argued, "That's just me leaving voluntarily." After listening to the old man's words, Gino understood now. The boy's lips curled up in amusement and he looked at Lauren, "So, you committed something and were kicked out of the Court of Owls by these people, right?" Luolun didn't answer, but Gino walked around Luolun. "Let me guess. Why did you tell me about Amber Gold? You want me to help you fulfill the dream you've always wanted to fulfill and return to the Court of Owls, right?" Lauren was not angry after being exposed by Gino. The old man who was angry a second ago regained his composure. He sat back on the sofa tremblingly, looked at Gino and said, "My child, you are very similar to me when I was young. I can see the ambition shining in your eyes, you desire many things. And the Elliot family name can help you." Lauren told him his plan. "Originally, I planned to let Thomas inherit my wishes, but he only wanted to study medicine and become a stupid doctor. So you came to find me." Gino snorted coldly from his nostrils. "Listen to me." Lauren stretched out his hand to signal Gino to shut up, and he continued, "I once did a stupid thing in the Court of Owls and was expelled. But they gave me a chance and offered to have my heir join the Court of Owls." Lauren stood up again and took out the white owl mask from the cabinet. He put the mask into Gino's hand. "Take it, half of your blood belongs to Gotham, they will not reject you, you can join that organization and enjoy the support of the entire city. The Claw Assassins will be driven by you, and the Amber Gold will sustain your life." Gino picked up the mask handed over by Lauren. This one was thin and light, with only a pair of eyes and nostrils exposed on the full-length white mask. He played with the mask in his hand, turned to stare at Lauren, and chuckled, "You were kicked out of the court in embarrassment, but they gave you a place. You know what this behavior looks like to me? It's like the owner threw a dog bone to the dog that was kicked out of the house." Gino's voice gradually became louder, and he slowly straightened up, his tall and mighty body exuding an intimidating aura. "The Court of Owls belongs to the Elliot family." The young man's voice gradually became lower, and he stared at Lauren with his blue eyes, "And now, you want me to go find these thieves with a dog bone and kneel down? Sorry, I don't like accepting charity from others." Gino gently clenched the left hand holding the mask. The white mask shattered under the squeeze of the force, and the ceramic-like mask fragments fell to the floor. "No!" Lauren let out a shrill scream. He threw himself on the carpet without any image, kicking up bursts of dust in the carpet. The old man trembled and kept picking up the mask fragments from the ground. He raised his head and glared at Gino, "Look what you have done. You ruined your only chance." "No." Gino's voice was louder than Lauren's. The old man was surprised to find the blue light in Gino's eyes. The bright blue light was far more dazzling than the amber gold in the box. A trace of cold mist spread around the young man's eyes, and the surrounding furniture was also covered with a thick layer of white frost. He heard his grandson sneer and say, "What I want, I will get it myself." Gino looked at the oil paintings on the wall and seemed to be talking to himself. "Amber Gold, mine. The Claw Assassin will be mine too. The Court of Owls will be mine too. The secrets they have will also be mine." Gino twisted his neck and made a crisp sound, "Whatever I want, it will be mine." He couldn't understand why he should follow Luolun's example and find someone who came to his door to be a dog when he could clearly rob it. If it's a good thing and its owner is a villain, grab it, that's Gino's way. He was not one to be kind to a bunch of things that should be hung from a street lamp. Besides, the Court of Owls was founded by his mother's ancestors. Taking it back by himself would only return the property to its original owner. You. Lauren looked at Gino's blue eyes and the terrifying aura of domination. Only then did the well-informed old man realize that he seemed to have never understood his grandson. The young man in front of him was far more mysterious and terrifying than he imagined. The killing intent in Gino reminded him of the claw assassins in the court. Gino ignored Lauren's mood at the moment. He leaned down and said in the old man's ear, "Now tell me, where is their lair?" Gino's words brought Lauren back to reality. He pursed his lips, took a deep breath and said, "I don't know." Gino frowned. "You really don't know?" The old man said confidently. "Of course, the Court of Owls is very cautious. They have hundreds of strongholds throughout Gotham's underground passages. Every once in a while the location changes." Gino listened silently, and couldn't help complaining in his heart. These rich people really have nothing to do. Why do they like to build so many strongholds? Are you afraid that one day you will be caught hanging from a street lamp? Lauren sighed. Originally, if you kept the mask, you only had to put it on your face and walk around Gotham City, and someone would find you, but now, your only chance has been ruined. You mean the mask? Gino glanced at the fragments on the ground. Then, he glanced at Lauren and hatched a new plan in his mind. The young man pointed at the fragmented mask and said, "Then why not put it back together?" "No, seeing the broken mask will only alarm them and make them hide deeper." "Really?" Gino looked at the mask thoughtfully. "It seems that the so-called Court of Owls is very cautious." After thinking about it, the young man sneered, "Since they don't want to be exposed, then I will lure them out. Do you know what the claw assassin looks like?" Chapter 77 The Pain of Red Blood. Gino got the claw assassin's clothing from Lauren, and at Gino's request, Lauren introduced several famous tailor shops in the city to Gino. Gotham late at night. Kino is walking on the road. The red light district in the busy city is full of entertainment, slutty young ladies, sluggish drug addicts, and drunken drunkards who fall asleep on the roadside. The charming laughter of the lady, the roar of the gambler unwilling to accept his failure, and the rising and falling sounds brought a chaotic and unique beauty to this sinful city. In this red light district street, the air is filled with pungent smells mixed with various vomiting smells, but the people seeking pleasure here have long been accustomed to these smells. Each of them has a cheerful smile on their face, but from there nothing the confusion in the hearts of these people can be seen in God's eyes. Kino bought a crude bat mask from a stall and put it on his face. "Would you like a newspaper, sir?" "Just $1. A dirty child blocked Kino's path. Children in Gotham are all very smart. This boy with dirty cheeks glanced at Gino's suit and watch, as well as his moist skin. This rich man was very young, and he looked like a decent person at first glance. Gino threw a coin, and the child caught it awkwardly. Then he hurriedly handed a newly released newspaper to Gino. Gino watched as he walked. On the main page of the black and white newspaper that smelled like ink was a striking headline, "Gotham's richest man, Bruce Wayne returns to Gotham." Gino heard many people talking about this matter in the surrounding pubs. Some people said, "It's funny, the richest man in Gotham has something wrong with his brain. What are you going to do back in this rotten city? Visit the graves of his two damn parents." After saying this, there was a burst of laughter in the tavern, and the sarcastic smile spread far through the tavern door. Kino continued to walk ahead. Suddenly, a thin girl blocked Kino's path. "Sir, do you want to come and play?" The girl was wearing a large brown windbreaker. As she spoke, she lifted up her coat to reveal the lace underneath. "No, you're too ugly." Gino's expression was flat and ugly. "Fake squid." Listening to Gino's words, the girl extended her middle finger to express cordial greetings to Gino, then she turned to walk towards another man at the other end of the street. "Sir, do you want to play?" Gino glanced at the two people talking. Just as he was about to leave, he saw a strong man in the middle rushing out of the corner. He was wearing a white suit and looked like a nouveau riche. Farky. The man seemed to be the street girl's boss, and he roughly grabbed the girl's wrist. "Look at this guy, he's dressed like a cop." Gino also glanced at the man stopped by the pimp. The other person wore a felt hat, clean jeans, and a brown windbreaker on his upper body. "To be honest, it's a bit weird to wear this outfit in the summer at night." "I'm not a cop." Gino heard the man speak slowly. "But..." Several strong gangsters with various weapons gathered around. Someone is going to be in trouble. Gino looked away. He had already reached his destination, a garment-making room. Kino walked into the room, took off his mask, revealed his true face, and told his boss what he wanted. After activating the money ability, the boss said he would come to pick up the goods at noon tomorrow. Jingle. Jino opened the store door and walked out. On the street not far away, the fighting continued. The young man I saw before was standing in the center of the road. He was dancing with a pair of fists like a tiger, and his hands and feet were very good. There were gangsters who were knocked down by his fists and lay on the ground wailing and screaming. The street girl whom I had just met seemed to be standing there in shock, and her boss obviously did not expect that this cop could be so capable. Seeing the other party rushing towards this side, the man gritted his teeth and pushed the girl standing in front of him towards the young man. The young man seemed to have no intention of attacking the woman. He stretched out his right hand and gently pushed the girl away. However, from Gino's perspective, he had already observed the dagger hidden in the cuff of the street woman. Taking advantage of the young man's back to the street girl, the girl pulled out a knife and launched a sneak attack. The sharp blade gleamed coldly under the neon light. Ah! She let out a piercing scream, arched her body, brandished the dagger and stabbed the young man in the right leg. The next second. Pfft! The dagger pierced the young man's thigh. The sharp edge of the knife tore through the jeans, cut the skin, and pierced the flesh. Ah! The young man screamed and subconsciously kicked the woman. A huge force hit the woman standing on the street in the abdomen, causing her to groan, stagger back and fall. The situation was chaotic. The blood-stained jeans gave the young man a gloomy expression. Seeing that the young man was injured, the thugs who had originally escaped regrouped again, brandishing their weapons and charging at the young man again. Looking at the melee of the crowd, Jino just stepped away, but the next second, a cold voice sounded in the young man's mind. Negative emotions from Bruce Wayne +10, +10. Bruce Wayne. Gino paused and looked at the crowd again. Looking at Bruce Wayne fighting with the gangsters, he seemed to be wearing makeup and contact lenses, and had no similar characteristics to the man Gino saw in the newspaper. Gino was a little silent. It's hard to imagine that the future famous Dark Knight, the super brain of the Justice League, is currently fighting endlessly with a group of gangsters. Moreover, a femoral artery was pierced by a street girl. Through fluoroscopy, Gino could see that the wound on Bruce's right leg was constantly spurting out blood. It would only take a while for this guy to go into shock due to excessive blood loss. It can only be said that the fledgling Bruce Wayne is still too inferior, and there may still be a long way to go before he can become the bat beacon of this city. Gino gave up the idea of leaving. He was even in the mood to take out his mobile phone and record the fighting scene. This is Batman's embarrassing moment in the future, and Gino feels that it has certain collection significance. Of course, this was all done casually. The reason why he stayed here was to gain points from Bruce. Gino played with his fingers and leaned against the wall, listening to the +10 that kept ringing in his mind. Did-a-did-a-dud. The roaring police car broke into this chaotic street. It's hard to imagine that nearly 30 minutes had passed since the fight, before Gotham police arrived at the scene. Hearing the roar of police cars blasting through the red light district, the gangsters who knew the nature of Gotham's black police officers dispersed in a hurry, leaving only Bruce Wayne standing there with his fists stained with blood. Hey! Two black policemen in dark blue uniforms drew pistols from their waists. For Gotham police officers, the best way to deal with trouble is to solve it. They pointed their pistols at the men. Pressing the trigger with their index finger, they chose to shoot without hesitation. Bang! The bullet casing popped out of the gun chamber, the bullet shot out along the muzzle, and a little smoke filled the air. Bruce's eyes widened. The training he received from the Assassin's League made him subconsciously crouch down to try to avoid the bullets. Chapter 78 Shadow Peeping Test. A single gunshot ignited panic throughout the street. People screamed and ran in every direction. These local old Gothamites have rich experience in fighting for their lives. It's noisy. Gino frowned, and the next second, he took steps slowly. I want to ensure that Bruce cannot die here. The reason is very simple. From the moment he met until now, Bruce has only provided himself with 500 negative points. This lamb still has a lot of wool that can be harvested, and the Zibben family also knows how to recycle it. Kino doesn't intend to let Bruce die like this. As Gino raised his right foot, the air seemed to thicken. Everything around him seemed to have been pressed into slow play, and the bullets that were originally rotating rapidly were also piercing the air at a slow speed, and the tail end of the warhead pulled out a beautiful cone-shaped airflow in the air. The shoes I stepped out once again stepped on the cold ground. The light projected by the purple neon lights gradually stopped in mid-air, and the spinning bullets stopped in the air. Time has completely stopped. Panic-stricken people, ferocious-looking police officers. Everything seemed to have been pressed on pause. Space and time seemed to be condensed at this moment, like a beautiful movie scene. Kino was not surprised by all this. The faster the speed, the slower the time. This is the relativity of time in the theory of relativity proposed by the great physicist Einstein. And the step I just took seemed to only take 0.01 milliseconds or less according to human time measurement units. In short, extraordinary speed can accelerate one's own action to the point of approaching the speed of light, thereby extending time infinitely and achieving the miracle of pausing time. Of course, strictly speaking, Kino did not suspend time, but his speed exceeded the time unit set by humans, achieving the time dilation effect mentioned by Einstein in physics. If he is fast, everything around him will slow down. Jino was walking leisurely. The expressions of the people around him froze at this moment. He walked up to Bruce and looked at the wound on Bruce's thigh and his frown. He turned around again and glanced at the 2 bullets fired at Bruce. If nothing goes wrong, one of the 2 bullets following a straight trajectory will hit Bruce's left chest in the next second. The other bullet would hit the gastrocnemius, calf, of Bruce's other intact left leg. This is not a situation Jino wants to see, only a living Bruce is a good Bruce. Oh, troublesome. Jino stepped towards the bullet. He stepped forward and held between his fingers the bullet that would hit Bruce's left chest. It was warm and hot in the hand, but the body was hot enough to burn the skin but could not hurt it at all. Jino just squeezed it gently with his hands, and the warhead made of copper metal was squeezed and deformed. He held the slug in his palm. As for the other one? Bullets on Bruce will provide you with considerable points. Then, he returned to where he originally stood. Looking at everything still around him, Jino somewhat understood the happiness of the speedster. With everything at a standstill, if a speedster wanted to do something bad, it might only take a few years to get half the women in America pregnant with his child. However, Jino is pessimistic about this. If he wants to do this, the premise is that the unlucky guy can bear it physically. The young man smiled and shook his head to dispel the chaotic thoughts in his mind. He raised his right arm and lightly snapped his fingers together. Snapped. The crisp snap of fingers sounded, and the chaotic and noisy sounds echoed through the busy red light city again. Bruce's mind was still stuck on the moment he heard the gunshot. The next moment, there was a numbness in the calf of his right leg. As if being hit by something, Bruce lowered his head and saw his bloody left leg. The originally intact Jean's leg was scorched by the heat of the bullet, giving off an unpleasant smell. The bloody wounds brought Bruce back to his senses, and he knew exactly what happened. He was hit by a bullet. This bad news put a layer of gloom on Bruce's already bad mood. Negative emotions from Bruce Wayne plus 20. Bruce took a deep breath. He knew that he had to stay calm in the current situation. The man looked around. Among the people running away in panic, there were also 2 black policemen walking toward him. And, in the corner, a tall young man wearing a bat mask and sportswear. He saw the man open his palm, and a shriveled bullet fell down the palm, hitting the mud pit and splashing a little water. He saw the masked man look at him deeply. Then, that person disappeared out of thin air? Bruce wanted to rub his eyes to try to prove that his eyesight was fine. He thought again about the purpose of coming to this street. See with your own eyes the changes and development of Gotham, and then make up your mind to challenge the city's evil. However, the first step on the road caused Bruce to suffer setbacks. The strength coming from his shoulders brought Bruce back to his senses. 2 police officers held the weak Bruce on one side and escorted him into a police car. Hey, you bastard, you're going to a detention center tonight. Bruce wanted to resist, but he lost too much blood and his body was too weak to move. Bruce was pushed into the police car, and he leaned weakly on the back seat of the police car. The car window slowly rolled up and drove away from the alley. Bruce turned his head with difficulty and looked out the window. Under the neon lights, at the entrance of the alley, the guy wearing the bat mask appeared suddenly and without warning. He tilted his head, then stretched out 2 fingers and aimed his other hand at his temple in a shooting gesture. Immediately, the figure disappeared without warning again, as if what was left there before was just an illusory bubble. What? This strange and terrifying scene made Bruce breathe faster. What is that thing metaphorizing? This was the first thought that came to Bruce's mind. The smarter a person is, the more things his brain can think of. His thoughts were subconsciously drawn far back in time. 2 fallen men, a gun, and 2 bullets. Bruce fell into memories. He seemed to be standing in a familiar alley again. The cold concrete floor seemed to always have a pool of blood that could not be washed away. He remembers a lot. He remembered the movie he watched that night. He remembers his parents holding his hand and walking into a dark alley. He remembered the masked murderer who appeared out of nowhere. He remembered the dark pistol glowing with orange flames. He remembered his father's roar, his mother's scream, and the broken pearl necklace hitting the ground. It seems that the voices and faces of my parents in the past still appear in my mind. Bruce's expression grew darker. If there was anything that was Bruce's backlash, it was the death of his parents. No matter who you are. Bruce's voice was filled with anger. I will remember you. Negative emotions from Bruce Wayne +1000, +1000. P.S. The author is a liberal arts student, and I also consulted Baidu information for time dilation. If any reader feels there is an error, please point it out and I will change it. Over. Chapter 79 When Darkness is Born. Did-a-did-a-dud. The red and blue lights on the roof of the car flickered into the car, reflecting Bruce's uncertain face. The roaring police car was driving on the circular mountain road, and the 2 policemen were laughing and discussing which brothel they should go to after get off work to hang out and enjoy themselves. Bruce's eyes gradually became firm. He couldn't be taken back to the police station, he couldn't reveal his identity. Stop the car and let me out. Bruce said slowly. To be honest, if a normal person had lost so much blood, he might have fallen into a coma. However, the super strong willpower and the scene of 2 fingers and a gun he saw before leaving Bruce to miraculously straighten up. The black police officer sitting in the passenger seat turned his head and warned Bruce with his eyes, "Hey, you'd better sit still." But the moment the black policeman turned his head, Bruce opened his hands and lunged towards the front seat. Bang! His hands clasped the steering wheel and twisted suddenly. The 2 black policemen were frightened and wanted to stop Bruce. "Oh, damn, you madman!" As the steering wheel moved to the right, the police car that was going straight veered off the road, staggered off the road like a drunken man, and fell down the slope. Boom! The overturned police car slowly came to a stop after hitting a big tree. Bruce kicked the broken window and climbed out of the police car on his hands and knees. There was a strong smell of gasoline in my nostrils. Bruce was silent for a moment, but he still dragged his seriously injured body to rescue the 2 policemen from the car. Boom! There was another explosion, and the flowing gasoline burned and exploded instantly when it encountered flames, sending black smoke straight into the sky. Bruce dragged his seriously injured body away and walked away. He had to leave here and find a way to save himself. The covered wound was oozing with blood. Bruce gasped for air. He took out his cell phone. Result. The broken screen and fuselage of the mobile phone declared that the mobile phone was scrapped. The vision in front of me gradually blurred. Click, click. It seemed to be the sound of boots stepping on branches. Bruce turned his head with difficulty. In the endless woods, under the cover of the moonlight, he saw the strange figure again. The other party stood under a towering locust tree, and then, an arm stretched out into the darkness. The gentle moonlight illuminated the suit and fell on the mysterious man's right hand. The hand was holding a phone. Although he couldn't see the person's true face clearly, Bruce could tell that the other person was in a good mood. He played with the phone and looked at Bruce with a playful look. Then, he was throwing the mobile phone with the white glove on his right hand like a superior god. A brand new mobile phone traced a beautiful arc in the moonlight and landed on the empty grass 200 meters away from Bruce. It was like a light called hope falling not far away from Bruce. After doing all this, the other party stepped towards the depths of darkness. Wait a minute. Bruce dug his fingers into the soil with both hands. He supported his upper body and roared angrily. He wanted to find out the true identity of the mysterious man, but that figure gradually disappeared into the moonlight. The feeling of weakness swept through the whole body again. Bruce could only put down the idea of exploring the true identity of the mysterious man. He used his hands and legs together, like an anesthetized patient who had just stepped out of the hospital bed. Pain and fatigue continued to sweep through his body, and the man didn't know how long he had been crawling. Until I grabbed the brand new touch-tone mobile phone and pressed the button to dial the number of the housekeeper Afu. After informing the other party of his location, the tight thread in Bruce's mind finally broke. He rolled his eyes, his cheeks dug into the wet soil, and became unconscious again. Wayne Manor. The ancient castle built of black marble is quiet and majestic. The iron fence of the manor isolates the castle from the outside world, as if someone separates his soul from the world. When Bruce woke up again, he found that he was covered with a thin quilt. He looked around, and the familiar layout of the room made a big stone fall in his heart. He returned to the castle again. Bruce tried to push himself up to sit up. Hiss! Severe pain shot through his legs, tugging at Bruce's nerves. He opened the quilt and saw his legs wrapped in white gauze like rice dumplings. Although it hurts, I can barely walk. Bruce hobbled his legs to the window. He opened the curtains, and the soft moonlight fell on Bruce. He was silent for a moment and closed the curtains again. Bruce sat back on the bed, but his mind was thinking about the scene last night. Just as I guessed, the crime rate in the city of Gotham is soaring horribly at an unimaginable speed. Master Bruce. There was a slow knock on the door from behind. An old man in a straight suit walked towards Bruce with a tray in hand. Your breakfast. The steaming breakfast was placed on the table not far from Bruce. The grey-haired old man stared at Bruce's back silently, his eyes full of distress, but his words were somewhat venomous. Master Bruce, the aorta of his left leg was cut, and his right calf was penetrated by a bullet. Honestly, it's a miracle that you survived this kind of injury. I know, Alfred, but I'm fine. Bruce shook his head and stood up. He refused Alfred's support and walked towards his parents' house. He was going there to think about something. Go make some resolutions. Bruce went to his parents' room. A bust statue was placed in the originally spacious room, and this statue looked like Bruce's dead father. He threw his body onto the soft sofa. Bruce squinted his eyes and looked at the statue, but he was thinking about everything that happened last night. Sinful Gotham, a mysterious man wearing a bat mask. Bruce took a deep breath, his beautiful blue eyes full of fatigue. I have the richest wealth. Have superb martial arts. Have great housekeepers. He stared at the statue, his eyes full of burning flames. I tried to wait. I try to be patient. But what should I do? He seemed to be asking the statue, and also seemed to be asking himself. What can I do to make these heinous criminals fear me? No one answered. However, the masked man's raised two fingers and shooting gesture came to mind again. Bat. Bruce muttered to himself. My fear. He thought about the time he fell into the Batcave as a child. Those countless flying bats have been Bruce's fear for many years. Bruce's eyes flashed, and he seemed to suddenly figure something out, and murmured. If you want to make others fearful, then become fearful. Bruce took a deep breath and had an idea in his mind, a plan. He rang the bell at hand, his voice low. Afu, contact the technology department for me and ask them to send some materials. I want to build something. In the next chapter, there is a confrontation between Bruce and the protagonist. I want to think about how to write it with more conflict. Chapter 80, Discussion of Banquet Confrontation. The next night. Elliot Manor. In a room facing south, Kino was adjusting his tie. Her slightly curly blonde hair is paired with a black slim-fitting suit, which accentuates her strong figure. Gino straightened the tie on his chest and looked at himself in the mirror calmly. Hey, Gino, don't forget to have a banquet tonight. Thomas's voice sounded outside the door. I remember. Gino responded loudly, his eyes falling on the canvas bag in the corner, and his eyes were playful. I am looking forward to attending the gathering of Gotham's upper class. This game of cat and mouse. Gino clasped the expensive watch on his wrist. He is ready. The young man walked out of the room and looked at the handsome boy. The brown-haired Thomas, who was almost middle-aged, pulled the tie around his neck and said with a smile, to be honest, you are as handsome now as I was when I was young. Gino shrugged, he had nothing to say to his shameless uncle. The two walked along the second floor into the living room. Letitia, who had just undergone psychological treatment, was lying on the sofa and sleeping, with a soft blanket covering her body. Not far away sat a bespectacled female doctor wearing a white coat and beautiful blonde hair. The girl's lower body is paired with a knee-length skirt and black stockings, and paired with a pair of black high heels. She looks youthful and beautiful. A pair of beautiful blue eyes stared at the doll in Letitia's hand, her pretty face thoughtful. Dr. Harleen, what's the diagnosis? Thomas scratched his head and walked between the two of them. His eyes glanced at Letitia, who was sleeping, and a trace of guilt flashed in his eyes. Hey? Oh, Her brain nerves have been irreversibly damaged. Harleen pursed her lips and stroked the thin black stockings on her thighs with both hands. The woman slowly stood up, her little nose under the black-rimmed glasses shrugged. She hesitated for a moment and whispered, "To be honest, recovery is possible. Not very sexual. She's mentally devastated." Coupled with the influence of brain nerve compression and living environment and other factors, she developed an escape personality. "I only want to remember the memories I want to remember." Harleen looked at Letitia. Inexplicably, a flash of envy flashed in her eyes. No one can escape their past, except mental illness. Jino silently glanced at the sleeping Letitia. It seems that Dr. Harleen's medical skills are very good. His eyes glanced at Dr. Harleen. Big bright eyes, a straight bridge of nose and a rosy little mouth. Will this woman be the famous Harley Quinn in the future? Jino had some expectations in his heart. If so, it means he can harvest points from it. Anyway, thank you very much, Dr. Harleen. Thomas smiled and took out a few bills from his pocket wallet. He was just about to put money into Harleen's hands. However, Thomas glanced at the clock on the wall and couldn't help but slap his head in annoyance. "Damn it, Kino, do you have a dance partner?" Jino was stunned for a moment, then shook his head. He had just arrived in Gotham, had almost no social interaction, and had nowhere to find a dance partner. So, Thomas glanced at Harleen and said, "Miss Harleen Frances Quinzel. Would you like to attend a dinner party with Gino?" Harleen glanced at the handsome young man. And then at the ink stains on her hands. A feeling of inferiority engulfed Harleen's heart. The girl shook her head subconsciously. "No, forget it, I don't want to go. It's such a pity." Thomas winked at Gino. "It seems you can only attend the banquet with me. If there is a next time, I hope you can make an appointment with your dance partner in advance." "Maybe." Iceberg Restaurant. This long-established restaurant was originally founded by the Kobet family and is Gotham's oldest upscale restaurant. Melodious and classical music echoed in the splendid restaurant. Countless expensive sports cars of various styles were parked outside the restaurant. Those who come here to attend the banquet are either rich or noble. The hall was full of guests, laughing and joking. Buzz! The Lamborghini sports car roared to a stop outside the restaurant. The obedient attendant quickly opened the car door for the owner. Bruce, wearing a suit, stepped out of the sports car with long legs. "This car is so cool." The cool sports car appearance made the attendants express their sincere admiration. Bruce smiled nonchalantly. "Maybe you should look at another one." The thin lips under the tall bridge of the nose evoked a smile, and the co-pilot opened the door, and two black-haired and blue-eyed women stepped out of the car wearing luxurious dresses. This erotic scene immediately made those who witnessed it label Bruce Wayne a playboy. "Sir, please come with me. Your seat is over here." The two female companions held Bruce's arms and surrounded him towards the center of the hall. "Bruce!" A surprised voice sounded, and then Bruce saw a man standing up among a table of guests. "Thomas!" Bruce also had a look of joy on his face. There are 3 things worth being happy about in life. In good health. A dream come true. Old friends reunited. Bruce and Thomas are good friends. They grew up together until Bruce chose to travel the world as an adult and Thomas chose to become a surgeon. Thomas laughed and stepped forward, throwing his arms around Bruce. It's obvious that their friendship hasn't faded over time. "Follow me and I'll introduce you to my nephew." Bruce followed Thomas to the table. "Gino Luthor, my sister's son, is also one of the heirs of the famous Luthor family." Bruce looked at the smiling young man. The other person was sitting on a chair, one leg crossed over the other, with a lazy expression and a casual attitude, as if he was the owner of the restaurant. The two looked at each other. The next moment, an inexplicable sense of fear suddenly rose in Bruce's heart. This terrible feeling made Bruce tense up subconsciously. He didn't understand how this feeling came about. It seemed that the young man sitting in the chair could threaten his life at any time. The training he received in the Assassin's League made Bruce's sixth sense extremely sharp, and his sixth sense told him that this young man was dangerous. However, no matter in terms of physical appearance, Gino seems to be just a young man in his early 20s. With the unique publicity and vitality of young people, how could such a young man make him feel afraid? "Hello." Gino interrupted Bruce's thoughts. He heard Gino's voice ringing in his ears, and the blue eyes looked gloomy. "I am Gino Luthor." The boy stood up with a smile and extended his hand to Bruce. "Nice to meet you." Bruce remained silent and stretched out his hand as well. The two palms were clasped tightly together and then separated. The two sat down. The atmosphere was somewhat silent for a while. Gino fiddled with the knives and forks on the table and looked at Bruce with a smile. He took the lead in provoking the topic. Mr. Bruce, I have not been in this city for a long time. What do you think of the city of Gotham? Thank you to Mr. Beg who read the book for the 300-point reward. Thank you, Mr. Beg. End of the chapter. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.